Welcome to Midnight Lullaby, a place where every shadow tells a story and help you get into sleep today. So before that, like the video and subscribe the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now, let the darkness cradle you as the tale begins. The gravel crunches beneath my boots as I make my evening rounds through Restful Meadows Cemetery. 23 years I've walked these paths, and the sound has become as familiar as my own breathing. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause, crunch, pause. The rhythm keeps me company during the long hours between sunset and dawn. My flashlight beam sweeps across weathered headstones and elaborate monuments, casting moving shadows that dance among the marble angels and granite crosses. October evenings carry a particular stillness here, when the last autumn leaves whisper against stone and the air holds that crisp edge of approaching winter. But tonight feels different. Tonight, the stillness seems too complete, too expectant, as if the cemetery itself is holding its breath. I've developed routines over the years, small rituals that help structure the endless night shifts. First, I check the perimeter fence for gaps or damage. Then I walk the main avenues, verifying that no gates have been left open, no maintenance equipment abandoned. Finally, I make my way through the older sections, where the headstones lean at tired angles, and the inscriptions have been softened by decades of weather. It's in the oldest section that I first notice the anomaly. The Whitmore family plot sits beneath a gnarled oak tree, its 4 matching headstones arranged in a neat row. I've passed this grave site thousands of times, memorized its details through repetition. Eleanor Whitmore, 1847-1923. Her husband James, 1845-1921. Their children Sarah and Thomas, both claimed by the influenza pandemic of 1918. But tonight, something about the date seems wrong. I step closer, directing my flashlight beam at Eleanor's headstone. The carved numbers appear exactly as I remember them, 1847-1923. But as I watch, squinting in the yellow glow of my light, the final digit begins to shift. The 3 wavers, blurs, then resolves into a 4, then a 5. The date of Eleanor's death advances slowly, 1 year at a time, as if time itself is catching up to her mortal remains. I blink hard, rub my eyes, check my watch. 11:47 p.m. Perhaps fatigue is playing tricks with my vision. I've been working double shifts lately, covering for Peterson while he recovers from his hip surgery. But when I look again, the date now reads 1927, and it continues its steady progression toward the present. The autumn wind stirs the oak leaves above me, creating a soft rustling that almost drowns out another sound. A faint scratching noise, like fingernails on wood. It seems to come from beneath my feet, from the earth itself. I step back from the grave and check the adjacent headstones. James Whitmore's dates remain constant, unchanged, but Sarah's stone now shows 1918-1919, her date of death advancing with the same inexorable progression I witnessed on her mother's marker. The scratching sound grows louder, more insistent. My radio crackles with static. I adjust the volume, expecting the night dispatcher to check in, but hear only white noise punctuated by what might be whispered words in a language I don't recognize. The battery indicator shows full charge, the signal strength normal, but the voices in the static seem to be calling names, the reciting dates, cataloging the occupants of the cemetery around me. I continue my rounds with growing unease. 3 graves in the Riverside section show similar anomalies. Dates that shift and advance. Death years creeping forward through the decades. At each location, I hear that same subtle scratching, as if the residents below are making small adjustments to their commemorative stones. By 1 to 15 a.m., I've documented 17 affected graves scattered throughout the cemetery. No discernible pattern connects them. Different time periods, different families, different sections of the grounds, but each shows the same progression of dates, the same temporal drift that seems to pull the dead forward through time. I radio the main office, but receive only that strange static filled with whispered names. The scratching beneath my feet has become more pronounced, spreading from grave to grave, like some underground network of activity. When I kneel and press my ear to the ground, I can hear movement below. Not the gross physical motion of decay, but something more subtle. The sound of stone being carved, of inscriptions being edited, of permanent records becoming fluid. The temperature has dropped noticeably since sunset. My breath creates small clouds in the beam of my flashlight as I examine the newest affected headstone. Margaret Chen, recently interred after a long battle with cancer. Her date should read 1952-2023, but the death year advances steadily 2024, 2025, 2026, as if her story continues beyond the biological conclusion, as if the cemetery records a timeline that extends past earthly death. I think about Eleanor Whitmore, whose death date has advanced to 1934 in the time I've been walking these grounds. If the progression continues at its current rate, her recorded death will reach the present within hours. But what happens when the dates converge with the current year? What happens when past and present collapse into the same moment? The scratching has become a symphony now, dozens of subtle sounds creating a rhythm beneath my feet. It's purposeful, coordinated, as if the cemetery's residents are collaborating on some vast revision of their collective history. My flashlight battery begins to dim despite being fully charged when my shift began. The beam flickers and stabilizes, keeping time with the underground percussion. At 20:30 a.m., I discover that my own footsteps are being recorded. The realization comes when I notice fresh scratches in the earth near the chapel, small marks that follow the exact path of my evening rounds. They're barely visible, like the tracks of some burrowing creature, but they trace my route with perfect accuracy. More disturbing still, the marks extend beyond my actual movements, mapping paths I haven't taken yet, documenting tomorrow's rounds through areas I won't patrol until the following shift. I follow the scratched trail as it leads away from the main paths, into the undeveloped section where future plots await their occupants. Here, among the empty grass and unmarked ground, I find something impossible, a headstone that bears my name. The marker is simple granite, identical to dozens of others throughout restful meadows, but the inscription sends ice through my veins. Marcus Wellington, Night Watchman, 1971. The death date remains blank, waiting. The stone appears aged, weathered by years of rain and frost, as if it has stood here for decades. But I know this section of the cemetery. I've walked past this exact spot thousands of times. This headstone wasn't here yesterday, or last week, or last year. Yet moss grows in its carved letters, and the granite shows the subtle erosion of long exposure to the elements. I step closer, and notice fresh scratches in the earth around the marker. The same type of markings I've been following throughout the cemetery. They spiral outward in complex patterns, forming some kind of map or diagram. As I trace their design with my flashlight beam, I begin to understand their purpose. They're not random marks or simple record keeping. They're a schematic, a blueprint for something vast and interconnected. The scratches connect grave to grave, creating a network that encompasses the entire cemetery. And at the center of this network, this hub around which all the lines converge, sits my own future headstone. The radio static reaches a crescendo, filled now with voices I almost recognize. They recite dates, coordinates, the administrative details of mortality. But beneath their enumeration, I hear something else. My own voice, older and warier, reading the nightly report from rounds I haven't made yet. I understand now that the cemetery has been preparing for me, documenting my presence long before I became aware of my role in its larger design. Every night shift, every careful patrol, every logged incident has been recorded not just in my official reports, but in the underground chronicles maintained by the residents themselves. The dates on the headstones continue their forward march through time. Eleanor Whitmore now shows 1941 as her death year, while Sarah has reached 1923. They're accelerating, these revisions to history, as if approaching some crucial convergence point. My watch reads 3:45 a.m. when I notice the first change to my own headstone. The blank space after the dash fills slowly with numbers. 1971-2024. The inscription completes itself with the same deliberate progression I've witnessed throughout the cemetery. But I'm very much alive, very much aware, very much capable of walking away from this place. Except my feet won't move. I stand transfixed before my own memorial, watching as the date advances through 2025, 2026, 2027. Each year that passes overhead brings a corresponding change to the stone, as if time itself flows differently within the boundaries of restful meadows. The scratching beneath my feet has become a constant whisper, the sound of ongoing revision, of history being rewritten in real time. The cemetery breathes around me, alive with purpose I'm only beginning to understand. Every grave is connected to every other grave through these underground channels of communication. Every headstone records not just a past death, but an ongoing existence that continues to accumulate time, to revise its relationship with the world above. And I am not the watchman, I realize. I am the watched. The residents of Restful Meadows have been documenting my presence, tracking my movements, and preparing for the moment when I join their eternal record keeping. Every night shift has been a job interview for a position I didn't know I was applying for. The dates advance faster now. 2030, 2035, 2040. Time accelerates, pulling me forward through years I'll never live, decades I'll never see. But here in the cemetery, surrounded by the careful chronicling of the dead, I understand that death is not an ending, but a promotion to a more permanent position. The scratching reaches a crescendo as my death date approaches the present moment. When the numbers align with reality, when past and future collapse into now, I'll finally understand my true purpose here among the stones and the shadows. I'll become the record keeper, the one who documents the continuing stories of Restful Meadows residents, the one who updates their dates, who tracks their progress through the endless years that follow death. The gravel crunches beneath my boots as I begin another round through the cemetery. But now I hear the sound differently. Understand it as communication rather than simple footfall. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause, crunch, pause. The rhythm of eternal duty. The cadence of the night watch that never ends. Story 2. The keys feel heavy in my hand as I turn them in the lock for the first time. 3 keys on a simple silver ring. Front door, back door, and 1 smaller key that the realtor said opens. The old storage room in the basement, though you probably won't need that one. Her laugh had been too bright, too quick. The kind of laugh that fills empty spaces where explanations should be. The front door swings open with a soft creak that speaks of age and settling wood. The sound echoes through the empty rooms beyond, bouncing off hardwood floors that gleam in the afternoon sunlight streaming through windows that haven't been cleaned in months. Everything smells of lemon oil and something else, something organic and lived, in that cleaning products can't quite erase. Home. This is supposed to be home now. I step inside, my footsteps loud in the silence. The moving truck won't arrive until tomorrow. So tonight it's just me and the empty rooms and the strange intimacy that comes with inhabiting a space that belonged to someone else for 3 years. Mrs. Henderson, the realtor said, lived here since 1980, raised 3 children, lost a husband, grew old gracefully until the nursing home became the only option. She hated to leave. The realtor had confided during our final walkthrough, kept saying the house needed her, that it wouldn't know how to be empty. I'd smiled politely at what seemed like the sentimental attachment of an elderly woman to her longtime home. Now standing in the living room with dust motes dancing in the slanted light, I begin to understand what she might have meant. The house feels occupied, not empty despite the absence of furniture, not abandoned, despite the FOR sale sign that stood in the yard for 8 months before I made my offer. There's a presence here, a sense of ongoing life that makes me hesitate before turning on the lights, as if I might be interrupting something important. I walk through the rooms methodically, my footsteps creating a rhythm on the hardwood floors. Living room, dining room, kitchen with its yellow Formica countertops that haven't been updated since the Reagan administration. Everything is clean, almost obsessively so, but there are subtle signs of the life that was lived here. A slight discoloration on the wall where a favorite painting once hung. Worn spots in the wooden floor where someone stood to wash dishes for decades. The ghost impressions of a life fully lived. The kitchen window faces west, catching the late afternoon sun that turns everything golden. I stand at the sink, looking out at the backyard where someone, Mrs. Henderson, I assume, planted rose bushes that now grow wild and untended. Their blooms are past their peak, but the scent carries through the open window, sweet and slightly melancholy. That's when I hear it. Footsteps overhead, soft, careful steps in what I know is the empty master bedroom. The floorboards creak in a pattern that suggests someone walking from the window to the closet, then back again. A slow, measured pace, the walk of someone who knows exactly where they're going. I freeze, listening. The footsteps continue for perhaps 30 seconds, then stop. The silence that follows is different from the silence that came before. Heavier, more expectant. as if someone upstairs is also listening. Probably just the house settling. Old houses make noises, especially when the temperature changes. The rational part of my mind catalogues all the reasonable explanations while my feet carry me toward the staircase without conscious decision. The stairs creak under my weight, each step announcing my presence to whoever might be waiting above. The sound seems impossibly loud in the afternoon quiet, and I find myself trying to step more softly, though I can't say why. The upstairs hallway stretches before me, doors standing open to reveal empty bedrooms filled with dust. Filtered sunlight. The master bedroom is at the end of the hall, its door closed despite my clear memory of leaving it open during yesterday's final inspection. I approach slowly, my hand extended toward the doorknob. The metal is warm under my palm, warmer than it should be in a house that's been empty for 3 months. I turn the knob and push the door open. The room is empty, of course. Just hardwood floors and bare walls and windows that need cleaning. But there's an indentation in the carpet near the window, as if someone has been standing there recently. And the closet door, which I remember checking yesterday, is now slightly ajar. I cross to the window and look down at the backyard, at the rose bushes that catch the late light like scattered jewels. From this angle, I can see deeper into the garden, can make out the careful arrangement that speaks of decades of patient cultivation. Someone loved this view, stood here regularly to check on the progress of seasons, to watch the roses bloom and fade and bloom again. Behind me, I hear the soft whisper of fabric against fabric, as if someone is adjusting their position in a chair. But when I turn, the room remains empty, filled only with dust motes and afternoon shadows. I check the closet. Empty, as expected. But there's something strange about the way the light falls inside. The shadows don't seem quite right, don't align with the angle of the sun through the window. And there's a scent here, too. Faint, but unmistakable. Lavender and something else. Something like the perfume counter at an old-fashioned department store. Downstairs, a door closes. The sound echoes through the empty house, followed by the soft padding of footsteps across the hardwood floor. Someone is moving through the rooms below, their steps careful and familiar, the walk of someone who knows where every creaky board waits to betray an unwary foot. I move to the top of the stairs, listening. The footsteps have stopped, but I can hear other sounds now. The soft whoosh of a gas burner being lit, the clink of glass against metal, water running in the kitchen sink. Someone is making tea. I descend the stairs as quietly as possible, though each creak seems to announce my presence like a bell. The sounds from the kitchen continue. The domestic symphony of someone preparing a simple meal. Someone who has performed these actions thousands of times in this exact space. When I reach the kitchen doorway, everything is exactly as I left it. Empty countertops, clean sink, no evidence of any activity. But the scent of chamomile hangs in the air, and the kettle on the stove, a kettle I don't remember seeing before, is warm to the touch. I examine the kettle more closely. It's old-fashioned, blue enamel with small chips near the handle that speak of years of daily use. Steam rises from its spout in a thin, steady stream, though I never turned on the burner beneath it. The rational explanations crowd my mind again. The gas company checking connections. a neighbor with a spare key, making sure everything is in order. The realtor, returning for some forgotten detail. All perfectly reasonable possibilities that don't explain why I heard no car in the driveway, no front door opening, no greeting called out to announce an expected presence. I turn off the burner and set the kettle aside. It's still warm, still steaming slightly, as if someone has just finished using it. On the counter beside the stove, I notice something I missed before. A small ceramic mug, the kind of sturdy, a practical cup that accumulates in kitchens over decades of daily use. It sits in exactly the spot where someone might place it while waiting for water to boil. The mug is warm too. That evening, I sleep on an air mattress in the living room, surrounded by the few boxes I brought in my car. The house settles around me as the temperature drops, floorboards contracting with soft pops and sighs that sound almost like conversation. I tell myself it's perfectly normal, the natural sounds of an old house adjusting to the night. But sometime after midnight, I wake to the sound of someone moving in the kitchen. Not footsteps this time, but the soft sounds of careful activity. Dishes being moved, cabinet doors opening, and closing with the practiced quiet of someone trying not to disturb a sleeping household. The refrigerator door opens with its distinctive suction sound, then closes again. Water runs briefly in the sink. I lie still, listening, my heart beating loud enough that I'm sure it must be audible throughout the house. The sounds continue for perhaps 10 minutes, then fade into silence. But it's not the same silence as before. It's the satisfied quiet that follows completion, the peace of small tasks finished, and everything returned to its proper place. In the morning, I find evidence. A glass sits in the dish drainer that was empty when I went to sleep. The sponge by the sink is damp. The refrigerator hums slightly louder than it did yesterday, as if its door has been opened recently, and the motor is working to restore the internal temperature. I check the refrigerator, though I know it should be empty. It is empty, except for the baking soda box that Mrs. Henderson left behind to absorb odors, and a small bottle of milk that definitely wasn't there yesterday. The expiration date is still 3 days away. The moving truck arrives at 9 a.m., and for several hours the house fills with noise and activity. Boxes and furniture flow through the doorways in a steady stream, gradually transforming the empty rooms into something that resembles a home. The movers are efficient and professional, speaking in the practical shorthand of people who do this work every day. But I notice that they're careful in ways that seem unusual. They wipe their feet before entering, even though they're wearing protective covers. They speak quietly, almost reverently, as if they're in a church rather than an empty house. When one of them accidentally bumps a wall with a heavy box, he apologizes automatically, though there's no one nearby to hear. "Nice place?" the crew chief says as they finish up. "Got good energy. You can tell when a house has been loved." After they leave, I spend the afternoon unpacking, trying to make the space feel like mine. But everything I place seems to be in conversation with what was here before. My couch sits where another couch once sat, evidenced by the slight discoloration in the hardwood floor. My books fill shelves that held different books for 4 decades. My coffee maker occupies the same corner of the counter where another coffee maker once stood. leaving its ghost impression in the slightly faded formica. That evening, as I'm arranging dishes in the kitchen cabinets, I discover that someone has been helping. Items I'm certain I placed on the counter have moved to more logical locations. The sugar bowl sits next to the coffee maker, though I distinctly remember putting it in a completely different cabinet. The dish towels hang on hooks I didn't know existed, tucked into a small alcove beside the sink that I somehow overlooked during all my previous inspections of the kitchen. Everything is in the right place. Better than right. Perfect. As if arranged by someone who understands the kitchen's geography in ways that come only from decades of daily use. I make dinner. Pasta with marinara sauce from a jar, nothing fancy, and eat standing at the counter, looking out at the backyard where the rose bushes are barely visible in the gathering dusk. The house feels comfortable around me, settled and welcoming in a way that surprises me, given how unsettled I felt just 4 hours ago. After dinner, I wash my dishes and leave them in the drainer to dry. But when I check before bed, they've been put away, arranged in the cabinets with the same careful logic that guided the earlier reorganization. Everything in its proper place. Everything where it belongs. I should be frightened. Any reasonable person would be frightened by invisible hands rearranging their kitchen, by the sounds of someone moving through their house at night. But instead, I feel cared for, as if the house is trying to help me settle in, trying to make me comfortable in the space it has guarded for so many years. That night, I dream of an elderly woman with silver hair and gentle hands. She moves through the house with the confidence of long familiarity, adjusting a picture here, straightening a rug there, making small corrections that transform a house into a home. In the dream, she smiles at me, not the smile of a stranger, but the welcoming expression of someone greeting an expected guest. "You'll do fine here," she says, though I'm not sure if I hear the words or simply understand them. The house likes you. I wake before dawn, but I'm not alone in the darkness. Someone is sitting in the chair by the bedroom window. I can't see them clearly. The darkness is too complete, but I can sense their presence, can hear the soft sound of breathing that isn't my own. They sit quietly, patiently, as if they've been waiting for me to wake. "Mrs. Henderson," I whisper. The breathing stops, but there's no other response. No movement, no acknowledgement that they've heard me speak. But somehow, I know I'm right. She's here, in the chair where she probably sat on countless mornings, watching the sun rise through windows that overlook the garden she planted and tended for decades. I'll take good care of it. I say softly, the house, the garden, everything you built here. This time, I hear something that might be a sigh, though it could just as easily be the wind moving through the trees outside. When I look again, the chair is empty, nothing but shadows and the faint outline of furniture in the pre-dawn darkness. But I know she's still here. Not gone, not departed, but transformed into something that exists in the spaces between what is and what was. She's become part of the house itself, woven into its rhythms and routines, its memories and expectations. In the morning, I find fresh flowers in the vase on the kitchen table, roses from the backyard garden, arranged with the skill that comes from a lifetime of practice. The stems are cut at precise angles, the blooms positioned to catch the morning light that streams through the east-facing window. I didn't cut those flowers, but they're exactly right, exactly what the table needed to feel complete. They fill the kitchen with fragrance and life, with the continuing story of someone who understood how to make a house into more than just a shelter. The days establish their own rhythm. I go to work, come home, make dinner, settle into the evening routines that mark the passage of domestic time. And always, there are small signs of the other presence that shares this space. Dishes moved to better locations. Lights turned off in rooms I'm certain I left illuminated. Windows open to catch breezes I hadn't noticed. Never anything dramatic or frightening. Just the gentle adjustments of someone who knows how the house works best, who understands its moods and needs in ways that come only from decades of attention and care. I begin to think of her as a roommate rather than a ghost, someone who shares the space but respects my privacy, who helps without interfering, who has found a way to continue the work of home, making even after conventional life has ended. The roses in the garden bloom more vibrantly than they should for flowers left untended. The house settles into its nighttime quiet with contented sighs rather than creaks of protest. Everything functions slightly better than it has any right to, as if someone with intimate knowledge of every system continues to provide maintenance and care. One evening, as I'm reading in the living room, I hear the piano. There's no piano in the house now, but there was one once. I can see the indentations in the hardwood floor where it stood for decades, the slightly different coloration of the wall where sheet music once rested on a shelf. The melody is simple, classical, played with the gentle touch of someone who learned it long ago and has had years to perfect its expression. The music continues for perhaps 20 minutes, filling the house with harmony and memory. Then it fades into silence, leaving only the echo of notes that seem to hang in the air like incense. I don't feel afraid anymore. Fear has been replaced by acceptance, then by something approaching gratitude. Mrs. Henderson never really left because she never really wanted to leave. She found a way to stay, to continue caring for the place that was more than just a house to her. It was the physical manifestation of a life fully lived, a love made tangible in wood and stone and carefully tended roses. And she's teaching me, in her quiet way, what it means to truly inhabit a space rather than just occupy it, how to listen to what a house needs, how to respond to its moods and requirements, how to become part of its continuing story, rather than just another temporary resident. Some nights, I hear her moving through the rooms, checking locks, adjusting thermostats, performing the small rituals of care that keep a house healthy and whole. I've stopped getting up to investigate. Instead, I lie in bed listening to the sounds of ongoing love, the daily maintenance of a devotion that death couldn't interrupt. The house grows more beautiful under our shared care. Plants thrive in locations I never would have chosen. Colors seem richer. Light falls more gracefully through windows that somehow stay cleaner than they should. Friends comment on the atmosphere, the sense of peace and welcome that fills every room. It feels lived in, they say, like it's been loved for a long time. They're more right than they know. Mrs. Henderson and I have found our rhythm, our way of sharing space across the boundaries that usually separate the living from the dead. She tends to the things I don't notice. I handle the tasks that require physical presence in the contemporary world. Together, we keep the house alive, maintain its capacity for shelter and comfort, and the quiet joy that comes from a place where everything is exactly as it should be. Sometimes, in the evening light that slants through the kitchen window, I catch glimpses of her reflection in the glass, an elderly woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, checking on the roses that bloom in the garden she planted, making sure the house continues to serve its purpose as a place where love can take root and grow. She never speaks directly to me, but her presence is a constant conversation about the nature of home, about the difference between a house that simply contains life and a house that nurtures it. She's teaching me that some departures are really transformations, that some endings are actually continuations in forms we don't expect. The keys on my ring have grown warm from daily use, but they never feel quite like mine alone. We share them, Mrs. Henderson and I, along with the responsibility they represent. She holds the keys to the house's history, its memories and accumulated wisdom. I hold the keys to its future, its potential for new stories and fresh life. Together, we're both exactly where we belong. The house needs us both, and we need it. The roses bloom in cycles, marking time in a language older than calendars, speaking of continuity and renewal, of love that finds ways to express itself across any boundary. In the evening light, if you know how to look, you can see both of us tending the garden, the living and the departed, working side by side in the space where past and present meet, where a house becomes more than the sum of its rooms, where caring continues long after conventional life has ended. The keys turn easily in well-maintained locks. The house welcomes us both home. Story 3. The flashlight beam cuts through the darkness like a knife through black velvet, but somehow the shadows seem to push back, creeping closer with each step I take deeper into the forest. My breath forms small clouds in the cold night air, each exhale a whispered prayer that I'll find my way back to the trail soon. I shouldn't be here. The rational part of my mind keeps repeating this, but my feet continue forward, drawn by something I can't name. The camping trip was supposed to be simple, a weekend retreat from the city's endless noise, a chance to remember what silence sounds like. But when sleep wouldn't come, when the tent felt too small and the stars too bright, I found myself walking into these woods with nothing but a flashlight and the clothes on my back. The trees here are ancient, their trunks twisted into shapes that remind me of arthritic fingers reaching toward a sky they'll never touch. Pine needles crunch beneath my boots with each step, a sound both comforting and alien in this place where even the wind seems to hold its breath. My flashlight sweeps left, then right, illuminating patches of moss, covered bark and fallen logs that look like sleeping giants. That's when I first see it, a shape between the trees, perhaps 50 feet ahead, tall, human-like, but wrong somehow. The beam of my light touches it for just a moment before it steps behind a massive oak, disappearing so smoothly it might have been a trick of shadows and exhaustion. My heart stutters, then begins to race. Hello. The word escapes before I can stop it, echoing through the trees and returning to me distorted, as if the forest has chewed it up and spit it back. No response comes, only the gentle settling of branches and the distant sound of something that might be water running over stones. I tell myself it was nothing. A deer, perhaps, or the stump of a dead tree that my tired mind transformed into something more sinister. But as I continue walking, the feeling of being watched settles over me like a damp blanket. The air grows thicker, harder to breathe, and I notice my flashlight beam seems dimmer now, as if the darkness is actively consuming the light. Then I see it again. This time it's closer, maybe 30 feet to my left. The figure stands perfectly still between two birch trees. Their white bark making the darkness around it seem deeper by comparison. I force myself to keep the light steady, to really look at what I'm seeing. It's human in shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head where a head should be. But the proportions are subtly wrong, like a photograph that's been stretched just slightly out of focus. And where its face should be, where eyes and nose and mouth should catch and reflect my light, there's only darkness. Not shadow, not the absence of light, but darkness itself, as if someone has cut a hole in reality, and I'm looking through it into some vast, empty space. The thing doesn't move, doesn't react to my light. It simply stands there, watching me with those impossible eyes that aren't eyes at all. My hand trembles, causing the flashlight beam to dance. And in that dancing light, the figure seems to shift and blur, becoming more and less real with each quiver of illumination. "What do you want?" I whisper, though I'm not sure why I'm whispering. The words feel small and useless in this place, like drops of water on a forest fire. The figure tilts its head, a motion so etchingly human that for a moment I almost convince myself this is just another lost camper, someone playing a cruel joke or wearing some kind of mask. But then it takes a step toward me, and I see how it moves, not walking exactly, but flowing, its feet never quite seeming to touch the ground. I stumble backward, nearly tripping over a fallen branch, my light swinging wildly. When the beam finds the spot where the figure stood, it's gone, vanished, as if it was never there at all. But the feeling of being watched hasn't disappeared. If anything, it's grown stronger. I spin in a slow circle, sweeping my light through the trees, and I see them everywhere now. Dark shapes standing just at the edge of illumination, never quite clear enough to make out details, but unmistakably there. Tall and short, thin and broad, but all sharing that same terrible emptiness where their faces should be. They form a rough circle around me, these watchers in the dark, close enough that I should be able to hear them breathing, should see their chests rise and fall, should catch some hint of warmth or life. But they're as silent as the spaces between stars, as still as carved stone. My flashlight flickers, the battery finally beginning to fail, after what feels like hours in these woods. The beam weakens, and as it does, the figures seem to grow more solid, more real. I can see them more clearly now, and I wish I couldn't. Their skin, if it can be called skin, has the gray, white pallor of something that's never seen sunlight. It stretches too tight over bones that jut at impossible angles, and I can see dark veins beneath the surface, pulsing with something that definitely isn't blood. Their fingers are too long, ending in what might be nails, or might be something else entirely, something sharp and purposeful. But it's still their faces that terrify me most. Those wells of absolute darkness, deeper than any shadow has a right to be, seem to pull at something inside me, as if they're trying to draw out some essential part of who I am. I feel myself leaning forward, drawn by a curiosity that wars with every survival instinct I possess. The flashlight flickers again, dims further. Soon, I'll be in complete darkness with these things, whatever they are. The thought should terrify me, but instead, I feel an odd sense of anticipation, as if I've been walking toward this moment my entire life without knowing it. One of them steps forward, the first one I saw, I think. Though they're all so similar, it's hard to be sure. It raises one too, longhand, and I see now that what I took for darkness in its face isn't empty at all. There are eyes there, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each no larger than a pinprick, but gleaming with an intelligence that makes my skin crawl. They blink in no pattern I can discern, creating tiny constellations of malevolent light in that sea of black. Eve, we've been waiting, it says, and its voice is like wind through dead leaves, like water draining away, like the last breath of something dying. So very long we've been waiting. Waiting for what? I ask, though part of me already knows the answer, has always known it. For someone to see us. Another voice whispers from behind me, then another from my left, to really see us, and another, to understand what we are. My flashlight gives one final flicker and dies, plunging us into absolute darkness. But somehow I can still see them, or perhaps see isn't the right word. I'm aware of them in a way that goes beyond sight, beyond any of the five senses I've relied on my entire life. They're part of me now, or I'm part of them, the boundaries blurring like ink in water. What are you? I breathe into the darkness. We are what you become. They say in unison, that their voices harmonizing into something almost musical, almost beautiful. When you spend too long looking into the spaces between things, when you stare too hard at shadows and forget to look away, when you realize that the darkness isn't empty at all, but full of watchers, I feel myself changing, can sense my edges dissolving, my form becoming fluid and uncertain. My face feels strange, numb, as if it's falling away from me piece by piece. I reach up to touch it and find only smooth emptiness, a void where my features used to be. Don't fight it. They whisper, and now I understand that some of those voices are familiar, that they belong to other lost souls who wandered into these woods on nights when sleep wouldn't come, when the city felt too small and the wild too vast to ignore. The transformation doesn't hurt. If anything, it feels like coming home, like finally understanding a truth I've been running from my entire life. I was never really solid to begin with, never really as real as I pretended to be. I was always just shadows and suggestion, darkness wearing the mask of flesh. My clothes fall away, becoming nothing more than whispers of fabric that dissolve into the night air. My skin grows pale and tight, my bones reshaping themselves into angles that make more sense in this twilight world between reality and dream. My hands elongate, fingers stretching until they're perfect tools for reaching through the spaces between moments. And my face becomes a window into the vast emptiness that connects all things, filled with eyes that have seen too much and still hunger to see more. I take my place in the circle, another watcher in the woods, and we wait. Patient as stones, silent as vacuum. We wait for the next lost soul to wander into our domain with nothing but a dying flashlight and a heart full of questions they're not prepared to have answered. Sometimes, on nights when the moon is dark and the city feels too close, I remember being human. I remember the weight of flesh and the burden of a single perspective, the loneliness of seeing the world through just two eyes. But those memories fade like footprints in sand, replaced by something larger, something that encompasses all the shadows in all the forests, in all the worlds. We are watchers now, guardians of the spaces between certainty and doubt. And when the next seeker comes, drawn by the same restless hunger that brought me here, we'll be ready. We'll be waiting in the dark, patient as eternity, until they're ready to see us truly, until they're ready to join us, until they're ready to become what they were always meant to be. The forest is quiet now, but it's not empty. It never was. It's full of watchers, full of eyes, full of beings who have learned that darkness is not the absence of light, but the presence of something else entirely. And somewhere in the distance, I hear footsteps on the trail, another flashlight beam cutting through the night. We turn our many eyes toward the sound and smile with mouths that are no longer mouths. Soon, we whisper to the wind. Soon, the circle grows ever wider, and there's always room for one more. Story 4. The clicking of the projector has become my heartbeat. Click, whir, click, whir, click, whir. 30. 7 years I've been threading film through these mechanical fingers, watching stories unfold in 24 frames per second. But tonight, something is different. The theater closed 3 hours ago. The last patron shuffled out at 11:47, leaving behind the usual debris of popcorn kernels and sticky soda stains. I should have locked up, should have gone home to my empty apartment where the radiator makes those familiar groaning sounds. Instead, I find myself here in the projection booth, my fingers tracing the familiar controls. The theater below me yawns empty. Rows upon rows of red velvet seats face the blank screen like sleeping mouths. The emergency exit signs cast their green glow across the carpet, creating pools of sickly light. I can hear the building settling around me, creaks and whispers that old buildings make when they think no one is listening. But someone is always listening. I thread the film carefully through the gate. My hands know this motion so well they could do it in perfect darkness. The celluloid feels cold between my fingers, each frame a frozen moment waiting to come alive. This particular reel arrived this morning with no documentation, no shipping label, just a plain brown box with my name written in careful script across the top. The film itself is unmarked. No title, no distributor's mark, no date stamp. Just frame after frame of what appears to be nothing. Black leader. They call it in the business. The spaces between stories. But I can feel something in this nothingness. A weight. A presence. The projector lamp ignites with its familiar electric hum. Heat radiates against my face as I adjust the focus. The empty screen below flickers to life. A rectangle of pure white light suspended in the darkness. I should feel familiar comfort in this ritual, but tonight the light seems too bright, too eager. I press the start button. At first, there is only white. Pure, endless white that fills the screen from edge to edge. No image, no movement. Just that blank canvas that every story begins with. But as I watch, I begin to see subtle variations in the white. Shadows within shadows. shapes that might be clouds or smoke, or something moving just beneath the surface of perception. The sound system crackles to life, though there should be no audio track on this mysterious film. Static fills the theater, low and constant, like the whisper of wind through empty rooms. But beneath the static, I hear something else. Breathing. Slow. Measured breaths that don't match the rhythm of my own. I lean forward in my chair, squinting at the screen. The white is definitely moving now, swirling in patterns that hurt to follow with my eyes. It's like staring into a blizzard, or trying to focus on the static between television channels. But there's intention in the movement, purpose. And then I see myself. It's impossible, but there I am on the screen below. Not a reflection. I've checked the booth windows and they're clean. This is me, wearing the same worn cardigan, the same tired expression. The me on screen is sitting in a projection booth identical to this one, operating controls that mirror my every movement. When I raise my hand, he raises his. When I tilt my head, he tilts his. But there's a delay, just a fraction of a second, as if the light carrying my image needs time to travel some impossible distance. The breathing in the speakers grows louder. I realize now that it's not coming from the film at all, but from somewhere in the theater below. Someone is down there in the darkness, watching the screen, watching me watch myself. I should go down. I should check the exits, the bathrooms, the storage rooms. But my feet feel rooted to the floor, and my eyes can't leave the screen where my doppelganger continues his mirror dance. The theater on screen begins to change, subtle alterations that I almost miss. The red seats fade to a deeper crimson, then to brown, then to black. The walls stretch upward, growing taller and darker. The emergency exit signs flicker and die, one by one, until only the projected light remains. But it's still me up there, still my booth, still my hands on the controls. Even as the world around screen, me transforms into something vast and hungry, I remain unchanged, constant, eternal. The breathing below grows more labored, more desperate. I can hear wet sounds now, as if whoever is down there is struggling with something thick in their throat. But I can't look away from the screen, can't break the connection between myself and that other self who mirrors my every movement. Except now, he doesn't. Screen me has stopped moving. His hands rest motionless on the control panel while mine continue to adjust focus, advance film, perform the endless small motions of the projectionist's craft. He's looking directly at me now, his eyes finding mine across the impossible distance between reality and projection. His lips move. No sound reaches me, but I can read the words. Who is watching whom? The question echoes in my mind as I finally tear my gaze away from the screen. The theater below is no longer empty. Shapes fill the seats, dark silhouettes that might be people, or shadows, or something else entirely. They all face forward, toward the screen, where my other self continues his silent vigil. But if they're watching the screen, and screen, me is in the booth, then who is operating the projector in their reality? Who is threading the film, adjusting the focus, maintaining the delicate machinery that keeps their story running? I look back at the screen. The other projection booth is empty now. The controls operate themselves, the phantom hands guiding the film through its mechanical path. But the movie continues, the light continues to shine, the story continues to unfold. The breathing below has stopped. The theater is silent, except for the eternal click, whir of the projector. But I know they're still there, those shadow watchers, as real as I am real, as fictional as I am fictional. I reach for the stop button, but my hand passes through it like smoke. I am no longer operating this machine. It is operating itself, or being operated by someone else. Someone in another booth in another reality, where I am nothing more than light and shadow on a screen. The film advances frame by frame, each click of the mechanism marking another moment in a story that has no beginning and no end, just the eternal now of the projectionist, threading reality through the gate, casting light into darkness, never knowing if he is the one telling the story or if the story is telling him. The screen flickers. For just a moment, I see myself from below, a small figure in a bright booth, surrounded by machinery, casting stories into the dark. And in that moment, I understand that I have always been the movie, always been the projection, always been the light playing tricks on the darkness. The projector clicks on. The film advances. The story continues. And somewhere in the darkness below, someone breathes and watches and wonders who is watching whom. Click where? Click where? Click where? The sound has become my heartbeat again. Or perhaps it always was. Perhaps there was never a difference between the rhythm of the machine and the rhythm of the man who tends it. I settle back in my chair, my hands finding their familiar positions on the controls. Tomorrow there will be new films to project, new stories to tell. But tonight, I am both the teller and the told, the watcher and the watched, the light and the shadow it casts. The theater breathes around me, alive with possibilities. And the movie plays on. Story 5. The dome overhead creaks as it rotates, a sound like old bones adjusting to new positions. I've grown accustomed to these mechanical whispers during my 3 years as night observer at Mount Silence Observatory. The telescope, a magnificent Schmidt, Cassegrain with a 14-inch aperture, hums with quiet precision as it tracks its programmed coordinates across the star-drunk sky. Tonight's observation schedule calls for routine monitoring of variable stars in Cygnus. Mundane work, really. The kind of methodical data collection that forms the backbone of astronomical research, but rarely yields surprises. I should be grateful for the predictability. After what happened last month, predictable feels like a gift. But the universe, I'm beginning to understand, has little patience for human expectations of normalcy. The control room surrounds me with its familiar electronic ambience, the soft beeping of monitoring equipment, the gentle whir of cooling fans, the occasional click of relays switching circuits. My coffee grows cold in its ceramic mug. Forgotten as I find, tune the telescope's alignment. Outside, the October wind carries the scent of pine and the promise of snow. Through the observation slot, I can see the sky in all its autumn clarity. Light pollution is minimal here, thousands of feet above sea level and miles from the nearest city. The stars emerge in their billions, each one a sun burning across the impossible distances that separate us from everything else. I center Deneb in the eyepiece and begin my systematic survey of the surrounding field. 1 degree east, ½ degree north. Mark the position, record the magnitude, advance to the next target. The routine settles my mind into that meditative state, that comes with repetitive precision work. But something is wrong with the star field. At first, I attribute the discrepancy to tired eyes or equipment drift. The telescope's computer guidance system is old but reliable, installed 15 years ago and maintained with obsessive care. Still, mechanical systems can develop quirks. I double, check the coordinates, verify the alignment, run a quick calibration sequence. The readings are correct, but there's a star where no star should be. It sits approximately 2 degrees northeast of Deneb, burning with a steady white light that registers magnitude 4.2 on my photometer. Not particularly bright, easily visible to the naked eye under these conditions, but definitely not catalogued in any of our star charts. I've memorized this region of sky after countless nights of observation. This star wasn't here yesterday. I switch to higher magnification, and the mystery deepens. The new star shows no parallax shift, no proper motion, no spectroscopic anomalies that might suggest it's a nearby object masquerading as something distant. Every measurement confirms that it's precisely where it appears to be, a main sequence star approximately 1/400 light years from Earth, burning steadily in the constellation Cygnus. The coffee has gone cold. I pour a fresh cup and consider the possibilities. Equipment malfunction seems unlikely given the consistency of the readings. Atmospheric phenomena can create false images, but this object has remained fixed in position for over an hour. Could it be a nova? A star suddenly flaring to visibility after existing below the threshold of detection. But novas don't behave like this. They flare and fade, sometimes over days, sometimes over weeks. This star burns with unwavering consistency, as if it had been there forever. I update my observation log with careful notation. Unknown object at RA 242118's DEXA 453-1630, magnet 4.2, spectral class G2V. No detectable variability. The familiar ritual of documentation helps steady my nerves, but questions continue to multiply in my mind. At 2:47 a.m., I notice the second star. This one appears in Cassiopeia, burning with the same steady white light. Magnitude 4.4, same spectral signature. Same impossible presence in a region of sky I've mapped hundreds of times. I check my reference materials, cross-reference multiple star catalogs, even consult the old photographic plates stored in the observatory's archives. Nothing. These stars exist only in the present moment, only in the view through my telescope's eye. The heating system clicks on, filling the dome with the soft rush of warm air. Outside, clouds begin to gather along the western horizon, their edges silver with reflected starlight. I should be concerned about the approaching weather system, should be preparing to shut down observations if the sky deteriorates. Instead, I find myself searching systematically through constellation after constellation, looking for more impossible stars. I find them. 7 additional points of light that have no right to exist, scattered across the northern sky, like carefully placed markers. Each one identical in spectral signature, each one burning with that same unwavering intensity. They form no recognizable pattern, follow no obvious logic of placement, but they're watching me. The thought arrives unbidden, accompanied by a chill that has nothing to do with the October night. The stars don't watch anything. They're massive fusion reactors burning in the vacuum of space, separated from Earth by distances so vast they become abstract. Yet as I move the telescope from star to star, I can't shake the sensation of vast attention focused in my direction. The heating system cycles off, leaving only the familiar electronic whispers of the observatory's equipment. But now I hear something else beneath those mechanical sounds, a low-frequency hum that seems to emerge from the building's structure itself. It's barely perceptible, felt more than heard, like standing too close to massive machinery. I step outside onto the observation deck. The cold air bites through my jacket, but the sky remains crystal clear. Above me, all the impossible stars burn in their scattered positions, visible now to my naked eye, though they weren't there when darkness fell. They pulse slightly, not with the chaotic twinkle of atmospheric disturbance, but with a synchronized rhythm like a slow, vast heartbeat. My breath creates small clouds that dissipate quickly in the dry air. The familiar constellations wheel overhead: Ursa Major, Draco, Cepheus, ancient patterns that have guided human navigation and imagination for millennia. But now they're interrupted by these new additions, these uninvited guests that burn with purpose I can't begin to understand. I return to the control room and adjust the telescope to track the first star I'd discovered. Through the eyepiece, it appears exactly as before, a normal G-type star burning at a distance of 1,400 light-years. But normal stars don't simply appear in the sky without explanation, unless they've been there all along, and I've only now learned how to see them. The thought sends a deeper chill through me. What if these stars represent not new arrivals, but new awareness? What if the sky has always contained more than our instruments could detect, more than our understanding could accommodate? I key in coordinates for the nearest star and begin a detailed spectroscopic analysis. The data streams across my monitor in familiar patterns: hydrogen absorption lines, helium signatures, trace elements that tell the story of stellar composition and evolution. Everything appears normal except for one small anomaly in the infrared spectrum. There's a repeating pattern in the data, a subtle modulation that occurs every 1.7 seconds. It's too regular to be natural stellar variation, too precise to be instrumental error. The pattern resembles nothing in my reference materials, but it carries the unmistakable signature of structure, of design, of communication. My hands shake slightly as I record the findings. Outside, the wind has picked up, causing the dome to creak more loudly as its motors work to maintain tracking alignment. The approaching weather system will likely force me to shut down observations within the hour. But I can't bring myself to stop watching these impossible stars. Each one shows the same anomaly. Each one carries the same structured signal hidden in frequencies just below the threshold of normal detection. Together, they form a network of transmission points scattered across the sky, broadcasting some message I lack the knowledge to decode. But the message isn't meant for me, I realize. It's meant for something else, something that watches Earth from distances so vast they become meaningless. These stars aren't stars at all. They're beacons, navigation markers, signaling devices placed with careful precision across the cosmic void. And tonight, for the first time in my 3 years at Mount Silence Observatory, I have the equipment and the awareness to see them. The dome shudders as a stronger gust of wind strikes the building. Through the observation slot, I can see clouds beginning to cover the western constellations. Soon the sky will close, and I'll lose visual contact with my impossible discoveries. But I know they'll still be there tomorrow night, and the night after, burning their patient signals into the darkness. I begin preparing the shutdown sequence, but my movements feel automatic, disconnected. Part of my mind remains focused on those 9 points of light, on the structured signals they carry, on the vast intelligence that placed them there for purposes I can't begin to imagine. The telescope dome seals with its characteristic mechanical sigh. Inside the control room, monitor screens flicker with the last recorded data from tonight's observation session. But I know that tomorrow I'll return to this chair, power up these systems, and point the telescope once again at those impossible stars. Because now that I can see them, I can't stop watching. And somewhere in the vast cosmic distances that separate Earth from everything else, something watches back with infinite patience and unknowable intent. The heating system clicks on again, filling the dome with warm air and familiar sound. But beneath it all, that low-frequency hum continues, felt more than heard, like the distant heartbeat of something vast and waiting in the spaces between the stars. Story 6. The demolition zone stretches before me like a graveyard of domestic dreams. 7 houses in various stages of abandonment, their windows dark and doors sealed with official notices. The Riverside Commons Development Project claimed these homes through eminent domain 6 months ago, displacing families who had lived here for generations. Now it's my job to keep the curious and the opportunistic away from these hollow shells while they wait for the wrecking ball. But the houses aren't as empty as they should be. I discovered this on my second night patrolling the development. It was a simple observation, really. A soft yellow glow emanating from the kitchen window of 47 Maple Street, warm and inviting against the November darkness. Mrs. Patterson's house, they had called it, though Mrs. Patterson moved to a senior care facility in August when the eviction notices became final. I knocked on the front door, expecting to find squatters or urban explorers, but no one answered. When I tried the handle, I found it locked, just as I'd left it during my evening rounds. I circled the house, checking every window, every entrance point. All secure. Yet the light continued to burn in that kitchen window, casting cheerful rectangles of illumination onto the overgrown garden, where Mrs. Patterson once tended her prize, winning roses. The next morning, the light was gone. The house stood dark and silent, its windows reflecting nothing but gray sky and barren trees. But I knew what I'd seen, and I made a note in my incident log. Unexplained illumination at 47 Maple Street. Source unknown. No signs of unauthorized entry. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, the lights have become more frequent, more widespread, more impossible to explain. Tonight, as I begin my patrol at sunset, I count at least a dozen houses showing signs of occupation. Not the harsh glare of work lights or the flickering blue of television screens. Those would suggest squatters or vandals. These are the gentle, lived in lights of normal, evening routines, table lamps in living rooms, ceiling fixtures in hallways, the warm glow of kitchen windows where families once gathered for dinner. At 34 Cedar Avenue, smoke drifts from the chimney in thin, gray wisps that smell faintly of apple wood. The Hendersons always burned apple wood in their fireplace. They told me during the final days, before their eviction, said it reminded them of the orchard where they'd met 3 years ago. But the gas has been shut off to this entire development. The electric service disconnected. The water mains capped. There's no practical way for any fire to burn in those abandoned hearths. Yet the smoke continues to rise, carrying with it the scent of domestic comfort and the ghosts of countless winter evenings. I pull my collar tighter against the evening chill and continue my rounds. The streetlights went dark weeks ago, when the city stopped maintaining this section of the grid, but the glow from the occupied houses provides enough illumination to navigate the cracked sidewalks and overgrown yards. It's almost cozy, this warm light spilling from empty windows, creating pools of a false comfort in the dying neighborhood. At 22 Birch Lane, I can hear the faint sound of television laughter through walls I know contain nothing but dust and shadow. The Kowalski family lived there for 15 years, raising 3 children who played in the backyard, while their parents tended to the small vegetable garden that still grows wild behind the house. They loved their evening sitcoms, the laugh tracks mixing with the sounds of dishes being washed and homework being supervised. I approach the front window and peer through the gap between drawn curtains that should have been removed with the rest of the furnishings. But the curtains are there, clean and properly hung, and behind them I glimpse the familiar arrangement of a living room. Sofa facing the television, coffee table with scattered magazines, family photos on the mantelpiece. But when I test the front door, it remains securely locked, the deadbolt in position exactly where I left it during yesterday's inspection. The house is simultaneously occupied and empty, alive with domestic routine, yet devoid of any physical presence that might account for the warmth emanating from its windows. My radio crackles with static as I attempt to contact the main security office. The night dispatcher should acknowledge my check-in, but I hear only white noise punctuated by fragments of conversation that don't belong to any official channel. A woman's voice discussing grocery lists, a child practicing piano scales, an elderly man reading stock reports in a tone of practiced familiarity. These are the voices of the displaced families, I realize, the echoes of lives disrupted by bureaucratic necessity, carrying on their routines in houses that no longer belong to them. By 9:30 p.m., the entire development has come alive with phantom domesticity. Every house shows lights. Every chimney produces its impossible smoke. Every window glows with the warmth of active habitation. I can smell dinner, cooking from a dozen different kitchens. Pot roast and garlic bread, something with curry spices, the distinctive aroma of Mrs. Chen's famous dumplings from 18 Oak Street. But Mrs. Chen moved to Portland to live with her daughter. Her kitchen has been stripped of appliances, her recipes boxed and shipped to the Pacific Northwest, along with 40 years of accumulated memories. I continue my patrol through this neighborhood of contradictions, documenting lights that shouldn't exist, sounds that have no source, smells that emanate from empty rooms. The official explanation would involve electrical faults, atmospheric phenomena, tricks of perception brought on by solitude and suggestion. But I know what I'm experiencing, and it has nothing to do with faulty wiring or psychological projection. The houses remember. They remember the families who filled them with laughter and argument, celebration and mourning. They remember morning coffee, brewing in kitchen percolators, children's footsteps, thundering down hardwood stairs, the soft whisper of pages turning in bedtime stories read by lamplight. These domestic memories have soaked into the walls like moisture, becoming part of the structure itself. And now, faced with demolition and erasure, the houses are playing back these stored experiences like some vast, distributed recording system. At 11:15 p.m., I witness something that challenges my remaining skepticism. Through the front window of 29 Elm Street, I see a family sitting down to dinner. Not clearly. Their forms are translucent, wavering like heat mirages, but unmistakably present. A father carving turkey at the head of the table. Two teenagers arguing over passing the mashed potatoes. A mother serving vegetables from a steaming bowl. The Martinez family. I recognize them from the eviction hearings, where they fought unsuccessfully to save their home of 12 years. They sit now at a dinner table that was sold at auction 3 months ago, eating food that exists only in the house's memory of countless family meals. I tap gently on the window, but they don't respond. They're not truly there. I understand. They're more like projections, echoes of domestic routine playing out in the space they once occupied. The house is dreaming of its former life, and in those dreams, the Martinezes still gather for dinner every evening at 6:30. My breath fogs the glass as I watch this impossible family meal unfold. The father finishes carving and begins passing plates. The teenager's argument dissolves into laughter over some shared joke. The mother rises to refill water glasses, her movements showing the practiced efficiency of countless similar dinners. But when I circle to the back of the house and peer through the kitchen window, I see only empty rooms and dust motes dancing in the moonlight. The memories are strongest at the front of houses. I realize, in the public spaces, where families presented their best selves to the neighborhood, where holiday decorations were displayed and birthday parties celebrated. The development has become unstuck in time, replaying fragments of its residential history in an endless loop. Each house broadcasts its most treasured moments like a radio station locked on a single frequency, filling the November air with the phantom sounds of suburban life. At midnight, I discover that I'm not the only one witnessing these manifestations. Standing in the shadow of 15 Pine Street, I see other figures moving through the development. At first, I assume they're trespassers, urban explorers or vandals drawn by reports of paranormal activity. But as I watch through my binoculars, I recognize them former residents returning to visit their phantom homes. Mrs. Patterson tends her rose garden behind 47 Maple Street, her arthritic hands working soil that exists only in memory. The Henderson children play catch in their former backyard, their laughter mixing with the autumn wind. Mr. Kowalski sits on his front porch, reading a newspaper in the glow from windows that should be dark and lifeless. They're as translucent as the family I observed earlier, present but not entirely substantial. Some seem aware of each other, nodding in recognition as they pass on sidewalks that crack beneath their weightless feet. Others appear lost in private reverie, reliving personal moments that held special significance in their interrupted lives. I try to approach Mrs. Patterson. To speak with her about the roses she continues to cultivate in defiance of bureaucratic reality. But as I draw near, she fades like morning mist, leaving only the scent of flowers and the memory of gentle hands working beloved earth. The radio static has organized itself into fragments of conversation, snippets of the ongoing life that refuses to acknowledge its own displacement. I hear dinner-table discussions about school projects and job promotions, bedtime stories read in patient parental voices, television programs providing background comfort to quiet evenings. But beneath these domestic sounds, I detect something else, a deeper current of distress, of loss unprocessed and grief unexpressed. The houses may remember their happiest moments, but they also carry the pain of forced abandonment, the trauma of families torn away from their foundation. By 2:00 a.m., the manifestations have reached their peak intensity. Every house blazes with remembered life. Every yard hosts the ghosts of children's games and gardening projects. Every driveway contains phantom cars that transported families to work and school and weekend adventures. The development has become more alive in its abandonment than it ever was during its years of active occupation. I understand now that my role here isn't simply security, it's witness. These houses are performing their final act before demolition, replaying their greatest hits for an audience of one. They need someone to see their stories, to acknowledge the lives they sheltered and the memories they preserved. The wrecking ball will arrive on Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, 7 houses will be reduced to rubble and sorted debris, their accumulated memories bulldozed into dumpsters and hauled away to landfills. But tonight, for these few remaining hours, they burn with the intensity of lives fully lived and fully remembered. I settle onto the front steps of 12 Maple Street, the house that once belonged to the Thompsons, who raised 4 children here before retiring to Florida last summer. Around me, the phantom neighborhood continues its nostalgic performance, filling the night air with the sounds and scents of domestic happiness. A child's bedroom window glows with the soft light of a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. In the house next door, someone practices piano, scales ascending and descending with the patient repetition of dedicated study. From a kitchen window comes the smell of cookies baking, probably chocolate chip, the kind that filled lunch boxes and after-school snacks for generations of neighborhood children. These are not hauntings in the traditional sense, I realize. Hauntings suggest tragedy, unfinished business, souls trapped by violent or premature death. But what I'm witnessing here is something gentler and more profound. The natural reluctance of well-loved spaces to accept their own ending. The houses are not haunted, they're homesick. My watch reads 4:30 a.m. when the first manifestation begins to fade. The lights in 47 Maple Street flicker and dim. The smoke from chimneys grows thinner. The sounds of phantom conversations drop to whispers. The houses are exhausting their stored energy, using up the accumulated emotional charge of decades of family life. By dawn, the development stands empty again, truly empty this time, stripped not only of furniture and residents, but of the memories that had sustained these final nights of supernatural domesticity. The windows reflect nothing but gray sky and bare branches. The chimneys produce no smoke. The phantom families have returned to wherever displaced memories go to rest. I complete my final patrol as the sun rises over the condemned neighborhood. On Monday, the demolition crew will arrive with their machinery and schedules, reducing 37 homes to manageable debris in the name of progress and development. But I will remember these last nights, when love and loss collaborated to create one final performance in the theater of suburban dreams. The radio crackles with the day dispatcher's voice, sharp and professional after hours of ghostly conversation. Unit 7. Report status. I key the microphone and give my standard response. All quiet. No incidents to report. But as I walk toward my patrol car, I can hear the faint sound of a piano playing somewhere in the distance. A child practicing scales with determined concentration, preparing for a recital that will never come, in a house that will exist only in memory by the week's end. The demolition zone sleeps now, finally empty, finally silent. But I know that somewhere in the spaces between what is and what was 37 families continue their interrupted lives, gathering for dinners that last forever in kitchens that time cannot touch. And I am honored to have been their witness, their guardian, their final audience in the theater of remembered home. Story 7. The announcement echoes through the empty platform at 11:58. Last train departing in 2 minutes. Last train departing in 2 minutes. The voice is mechanical, dispassionate. The same recording that has counted down these final moments for years. But tonight, something in its tone seems different. More urgent, perhaps, or maybe just more final. As if this truly is the last train, not just the last of the evening, but the last that will ever run these rails. I stand near the yellow safety line, feeling the vibration through the soles of my shoes as the train approaches. The rumble builds from a whisper to a roar, metal on metal singing its familiar song of arrival and departure, of journeys that begin in one place and end in another, though sometimes, especially on the last train, the destination is not quite what you expected when you bought your ticket. The headlight cuts through the tunnel darkness like a searchlight, illuminating the curved walls that disappear into shadows ahead and behind. I've taken this train home from work every night for 3 years, but I've never noticed how the tunnel seems to breathe, how the walls pulse with a rhythm that doesn't quite match the train's steady heartbeat. The brakes engage with a pneumatic hiss that sounds almost like a sigh, like relief or resignation. The train slides to a stop with mechanical precision, the doors aligning perfectly with the platform markers. Everything exactly as it should be, exactly as it always is. The doors open with their familiar chime, 3 ascending notes that have become the soundtrack to my evening routine. But tonight, no one gets off. This is unusual. There are always at least a few passengers on the last train, even on weeknights. Late shift workers heading home, students returning from the library, people whose lives operate on schedules that don't align with the 9 to 5 world. But the cars that face me are occupied, and no one moves toward the doors. I step aboard car number 7, always car 7, because it stops exactly where the exit stairs will be at my station. The doors close behind me with a soft thud that seems more final than usual, like the sound of a coffin lid settling into place. That's when I notice them. Every seat is occupied, every single one. But the passengers sit with an uniformity that makes my skin crawl. They face forward, hands folded in their laps, backs straight against the orange plastic seats. Their faces are blank, expressionless, the eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance that I cannot locate. No one reads. No one checks their phone. No one fidgets or shifts position or exhibits any of the small, unconscious movements that mark the presence of life. They simply sit, breathing in perfect synchronization, their chests rising and falling with mechanical precision. I find an empty seat near the middle of the car, the only empty seat, I realize, and lower myself into it carefully. The plastic is warm, as if someone has just vacated it, though I saw no one get up. The train lurches forward with a metallic groan, and we begin our journey into the underground darkness. The rhythm of the rails creates a hypnotic percussion beneath us. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. But tonight, even this familiar sound seems wrong somehow. The intervals are too regular, too perfect, like a metronome keeping time for some vast, invisible orchestra. I look around at my fellow passengers, searching for some sign of recognition, some acknowledgement of shared humanity. But their faces remain blank, their gazes fixed forward. A woman in a business suit sits across the aisle from me, her briefcase balanced precisely on her knees. Her makeup is perfect, not a hair out of place, but her eyes are completely vacant, as if she's looking at something only she can see. Next to her, an elderly man in a cardigan grips the handle of his walking cane with both hands. The wood is polished smooth by years of use, and I can see the indentations where his fingers have worn grooves in the surface. But his knuckles aren't white with tension, his grip isn't tight. Everything about him suggests waiting, infinite patience, as if he's prepared to sit exactly like this for eternity. The train sways as we round a curve, and I feel the familiar centrifugal force that always makes me grab for the handrail. But none of the other passengers move. They remain perfectly upright, perfectly still, as if they're immune to the physics that govern the rest of us. We pull into Central Station, my first landmark on the journey home. Usually, this is where half the remaining passengers disembark, where the car empties out enough that you can stretch your legs and claim a seat by the window. But tonight, no one gets up. No one even looks toward the doors as they open with their 3-note chime. The platform outside is empty, not just free of waiting passengers, but truly empty in a way that suggests abandonment. The fluorescent lights flicker in patterns that hurt to watch directly, and the vending machines stand dark and silent, their displays blank as closed eyes. No one gets on. The doors remain open for exactly 60 seconds. I count them, listening to the rhythm of my own heartbeat against the mechanical hum of the train's ventilation system. Then the chime sounds again. The doors close, and we continue into the darkness. I try to catch the eye of the teenager sitting 2 rows ahead of me. He's wearing headphones, but I can't hear any music leaking from them. His phone rests in his lap, screen black, and his thumb hovers over it, as if he's forgotten what he meant to do. When I lean forward slightly, trying to see his face in profile, I notice that his eyes don't blink. They remain wide open, fixed on that same invisible point that seems to fascinate all the passengers. "Excuse me," I say softly. He doesn't respond. None of them do. My voice seems to be absorbed by the orange plastic seats and gray metal walls, disappearing into the humming machinery of the train car, without creating even the smallest ripple of acknowledgement. I try again, louder this time. "Excuse me, is this the train to Millfield?" Still nothing. The woman across the aisle continues to stare forward, her briefcase balanced with mathematical precision on her knees. The elderly man's grip on his cane never varies. The teenager's thumb hovers eternally above his dark phone screen. We pass through Riverside Station without stopping. This is wrong. The train always stops at Riverside. It's a major transfer point, even late at night. But we glide through the platform without slowing, past the few people waiting there who don't seem to see us pass. Or perhaps they do see us, and they know better than to try to board. The tunnel walls flow past the windows in an endless stream of concrete and cables, occasionally broken by the colored lights that mark emergency exits and service passages. But tonight, the colors seem wrong. Blues that are too blue, reds that pulse like arterial blood, yellows that hurt to look at directly. I check my watch. 12:23. We should have reached Millfield by now. Should be approaching the familiar curve that brings us up to street level, and the modest platform where I've disembarked thousands of times before. But we continue underground, the rails stretching ahead into a darkness that seems deeper than any darkness should be. The woman across from me finally moves, and I feel a surge of relief so powerful it makes me dizzy. But she's only adjusting the position of her briefcase, moving it from her knees to the floor with the same mechanical precision that marks every other action on this train. When she settles back into her seat, her face returns to that same blank expression, her eyes refocusing on that invisible point that I'm beginning to think might be more real than the world around us. I stand up, testing whether movement is allowed, whether the rules that govern the other passengers apply to me as well. No one turns to look. No one acknowledges my action. I make my way toward the front of the car, holding the handrails for balance as the train sways through curves that don't correspond to any route I remember. The door to the next car is open, and I can see that it too is filled with passengers, exhibiting the same blank uniformity. Every seat occupied, every face expressionless, every gaze fixed forward. I walk through, searching for some variation, some sign that these are individuals rather than iterations of the same fundamental pattern. But they are all the same. Different clothes, different ages, different physical characteristics, but identical in their emptiness, their perfect stillness, their synchronized breathing. A businessman in an expensive suit sits next to a construction worker in paint-stained overalls, but they share the same vacant expression, the same mechanical posture, the same sense of waiting for something that may never come. I continue forward through car after car, each one exactly like the last. The train seems longer than I remember, stretching further into darkness than should be physically possible. How many cars are there? When I took this train yesterday, last week, last month, was it always this long? Or has it grown during the night, adding sections like a metallic organism, reproducing itself in the underground darkness? Finally, I reach the first car, the one immediately behind the driver's compartment. Through the small window in the door, I can see the operator's booth, but I cannot see the operator. The controls move by themselves, levers shifting position, buttons pressing and releasing, displays cycling through information that means nothing to me. The train runs itself, following rails that lead deeper underground than any rails should go. I return to car 7, to my seat that remains warm and waiting. As I sit down, I notice that my reflection in the dark window across the aisle looks different. My face appears blank, expressionless, my eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. I try to change my expression, to break the vacant stare, but the reflection doesn't respond to my efforts. The train begins to slow. For a moment, hope flickers in my chest. Perhaps we're finally approaching Millfield. Perhaps this long journey through the extended darkness is finally ending. But when we stop, the station platform outside is not Millfield. It's not any station I recognize. The sign reads, Terminus, in letters that seem to shift and blur when I try to focus on them directly. The platform is empty, except for a single figure standing near what might be an exit, though the shadows are too deep to be certain. The doors open with their familiar 3-note chime, but now the sound carries harmonics I've never heard before, overtones that seem to resonate in my bones rather than my ears. The other passengers begin to stand, moving with the same mechanical precision they've displayed throughout the journey. One by one, they file toward the doors. The woman with the briefcase, the elderly man with the cane, the teenager with the silent headphones. They move in single file, their footsteps creating a rhythm that matches the clicking of the rails, the beating of hearts, the ticking of clocks that measure time in places where time has forgotten its own meaning. I remain seated, uncertain whether I should follow, uncertain whether I have a choice. The car empties around me, each passenger stepping onto the platform and disappearing into the shadows near the exit. Soon, I am alone with the warm plastic seats and the humming ventilation system and the reflection in the window that doesn't quite match my movements. The doors remain open. The 3-note chime sounds again, not as a warning of closure, but as an invitation, or perhaps a command. I stand and walk toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the empty car. The platform outside is concrete and steel, utilitarian in the way of all subway stations. But there's something organic about the shadows that pool in its corners, something alive about the way the darkness seems to breathe. The figure near the exit becomes clearer as I approach. It's wearing a uniform I don't recognize, holding a clipboard that might contain names, or destinations, or some other list that determines who belongs where in this underground geography. When it looks up at me, I see that its face is my face, but blank in the way of all the passengers on the last train. Welcome, it says in a voice that might be my voice, filtered through the mechanical precision that governs this place. You're right on time. I want to ask where I am, how to get home, why the train brought me here instead of to Millfield. But the questions feel heavy in my throat, difficult to form, as if speaking requires more energy than I possess. Behind me, I hear the doors close, the 3-note chime, the mechanical sigh of the train preparing to depart. I turn to look, but the train is already disappearing into the tunnel, its taillights shrinking to pinpricks, before vanishing entirely. The next train. The figure with my face says, consulting its clipboard, arrives at 11:58. I check my watch. but the hands have stopped moving, frozen at 12:23, the moment when I realized we had passed Millfield, the moment when I understood that some journeys don't end where you expect them to. I find a bench on the platform and sit down, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap, my gaze fixed on some point in the middle distance that I cannot locate, but somehow know is important. Around me, other figures begin to materialize from the shadows. Passengers waiting for the next train. People whose journeys have brought them to this terminus where all routes converge. They sit with the same mechanical precision, the same vacant expressions, the same synchronized breathing that I witnessed on the last train. And I realize, with a clarity that cuts through the fog in my mind, that I am now one of them, that somewhere above us, in the world of surface streets and electric lights and time that moves forward in predictable increments, there is a platform where someone is checking their watch and wondering why the 11:50 train is late. Someone who doesn't know that the last train doesn't return from its final destination. Someone who will board tomorrow night, or the next night, or some night soon, and discover that the journey to the terminus is always one way, that the passengers who travel these rails with blank faces and vacant eyes are not traveling at all, but have arrived at a place where arrival and departure are the same thing, where waiting becomes a state of being rather than a temporary condition. The announcement echoes through the empty station at 11:58. Last train departing in 2 minutes. Last train departing in 2 minutes. I hear the rumble in the tunnel, feel the vibration through the soles of my shoes as the train approaches. The headlight cuts through the darkness, illuminating the curved walls that breathe with rhythms older than the city above. The train slides to a stop with mechanical precision, the doors aligning perfectly with the platform markers. The 3 note chime sounds, and the doors open to reveal cars filled with passengers sitting in perfect uniformity. Their faces blank, their eyes fixed on invisible points in the middle distance. I stand and board car 7, finding my seat warm and waiting. As the train lurches forward into the darkness, I fold my hands in my lap and fix my gaze forward, joining the synchronized breathing of my fellow travelers. Somewhere in the tunnel ahead, another station waits. Another platform where someone checks their watch and wonders about time, about destinations, about the difference between arrival and departure. The rails click beneath us with mechanical precision. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. The rhythm of the last train, carrying its cargo of blank faces and empty eyes through the underground darkness, collecting passengers who board with questions and arrive with answers they cannot remember, cannot speak, but somehow know are correct. The last train, always departing, never arriving, always right on time. Story 8. The fluorescent lights hum their endless tune above me, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow that makes even the brightest candy wrappers look diseased. I've been working the night shift at Murphy's 24 hour for 3 months now, and I know every sound this place makes. The refrigerators cycling on and off, the coffee machine gurgling to itself, the automatic door's pneumatic sigh when someone enters. But it's the silence between these sounds that gets to me most. It's 2:47 a.m. when he walks in. Always 2:47 a.m. I know because I've started watching the clock, counting down the minutes. The door hisses open, and there he is, average height, average build, wearing that same gray windbreaker that seems too thin for the October chill outside. His footsteps make no sound on the linoleum, which I've always found odd. But then again, maybe I just can't hear them over the constant electrical hum. He nods at me, the same polite nod he's given me every night for the past 2 weeks, and heads straight to IL3, snacks and beverages. I can track his movement by the slight squeak of his shoes, though the sound seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, like it's bouncing off the walls in ways that don't quite make sense. I pretend to organize the cigarette display behind the counter, but I'm watching him in the convex security mirror mounted in the corner. The reflection warps everything, makes the aisles look longer than they are, makes his movements seem slower, more deliberate. He reaches for the same item every time, a package of chocolate chip cookies, the store brand, the ones with the blue wrapper that nobody else ever buys. Then he moves to the cooler. The same cooler, third door from the left. It opens with a soft sucking sound, and he retrieves a bottle of apple juice. Not apple cider, not apple, flavored anything else. Apple juice, the kind they give to children. The transaction is always the same. He places the items on the counter without making eye contact, his fingers pale and cold, looking under the harsh lighting. When I scan the cookies, the barcode reader makes 3 quick beeps. When I scan the juice, just one long, sustained note that seems to hang in the air longer than it should. That'll be 467, I say. And he nods, reaching into his wallet. Always exact change. 4 singles, 2 quarters, 1 dime, 1 nickel, 2 pennies. His fingers are thin, I notice, almost delicate, and they move with a precision that suggests he's counted out this exact combination many times before. He never says a word. Not thank you, not good night, nothing. Just takes his receipt, which I've started giving him automatically, though he never asked for one, picks up his items, and walks back toward the door. The same measured pace, the same soundless footsteps. The door sighs open, and he's gone. At first, I thought nothing of it. Night shift attracts regulars, people with insomnia, workers getting off late shifts, folks who just prefer the quiet hours. But as the nights accumulated, something began to feel wrong. Not wrong in an obvious way, but wrong like a picture hanging slightly crooked. Something you can't quite put your finger on, but that gnaws at the edge of your consciousness. It's the exact timing that bothers me most. 2:47 a.m. every single night. Not 2045, not 2050, but 2047 on the dot. I've started checking multiple clocks, the register display, my phone, the wall clock by the coffee station, and they all confirm it. He walks through that door at precisely 2047 a.m. Tonight, I decide to test something. At 20:45, I move to the window and peer out into the parking lot. The streetlights cast yellow pools on the asphalt, and I can see the intersection beyond, empty except for the occasional car passing through. No one walking, no one approaching. 2:46. Still nothing. I blink, and suddenly he's there, standing just outside the door, not walking up to it, not approaching from any direction. I can see just there, as if he materialized from the space between 1 second and the next. The door opens, and he steps inside, 2:47 a.m. My hands are shaking slightly as he makes his way to aisle 3. The same routine. The same items, the same silent transaction. But this time, I'm watching more carefully. In the security mirror, his reflection seems slightly off, like it's delayed by a fraction of a second, following his movements rather than mirroring them exactly. When he reaches for the cookies, I notice something else. The package he selects isn't quite the same as the ones surrounding it. The blue is a shade darker. The text on the wrapper slightly blurred, as if I'm looking at it through water or thick glass. But when he brings it to the counter, it looks normal again, identical to all the others on the shelf. The apple juice bottle is cold when I pick it up to scan it, colder than the refrigerator should make it, cold enough that it almost burns my fingers. The condensation on the glass forms patterns that look almost like letters, like someone writing a message in the moisture. But when I try to focus on them, they dissolve back into random droplets. 467. Exact change. The receipt prints out in that familiar way, but as I hand it to him, I catch a glimpse of what's printed on it. The date is wrong. Not today's date, not yesterday's, but 2 weeks ago. The date of the first time he came in. He takes the receipt without looking at it, picks up his items, and heads for the door. But this time, I follow him with my eyes, watching carefully as he approaches the exit. The door opens, he steps through, and then nothing. The parking lot is empty. No figure walking away, no footsteps echoing on the pavement. Just the yellow streetlights and the distant hum of traffic on the main road. I run to the window, pressing my face against the glass. The lot is completely vacant, except for my own car parked near the dumpster. No other vehicles, no sign that anyone was ever there. But the register still shows the sale, cookies and apple juice, $4.67, paid in exact change. The next night, I'm ready. I've set up my phone to record, angled it so it captures both the interior of the store and the view through the front window. At 2:45, I start recording and position myself behind the counter with a clear view of everything. 2:46, empty parking lot. 2:47. The door opens, but my phone shows nothing. Just the empty doorway, no one entering. But I can see him clearly walking toward aisle 3. On the screen, the aisles appear vacant, but I watch him select his items, hear the soft sounds of packages being moved, bottles being lifted from the cooler. I stop recording and check the playback immediately. 11 minutes of footage showing an empty store. No customer, no transaction, nothing. But the register has recorded another sale, and there are 2 fewer items on the shelf. The pattern continues for another week. Every night at 2:47, he appears though the cameras never see him, though he leaves no trace except the missing inventory and the recorded sales. I've started leaving him alone during his visits, no longer attempting to interact or observe too closely. Something tells me that too much attention might break whatever fragile routine we've established. But tonight feels different. The air in the store seems thicker somehow, charged with an electricity that makes my skin prickle. The fluorescent lights flicker more than usual, casting moving shadows that seem to writhe and dance in my peripheral vision. Even the familiar hum of the refrigerators sounds different lower, more resonant, like a voice trying to form words. 247 approaches, and I position myself behind the counter as usual. But as the digital clock flips to 2:30:47, nothing happens. The door remains closed. The store stays empty. Minutes pass. 2:48, 2:49, 2:50. Still nothing. Then I hear footsteps in aisle 3. Not the usual silent movement, but actual footsteps, clear and distinct. I look up, and he's there. But something is wrong. He's facing me, staring directly at me for the first time, and his eyes are completely black. Not dark brown, not dilated pupils, but black like empty holes in his face. He doesn't move toward the cookies. Instead, he walks straight to the counter, those footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The refrigerators have stopped humming. The fluorescent lights have ceased their electric buzz. Even the traffic outside has gone quiet. He places something on the counter. Not cookies and apple juice, but a small piece of paper, folded once. His fingers, I notice, are too long, extending further than human fingers should, and they cast no shadow under the harsh lights. I unfold the paper with trembling hands. Written in neat, careful script are 2 words: "Thank you." When I look up, he's gone, not walking away, not moving toward the door, simply absent, as if he was never there at all. But the paper remains in my hands, real and solid and impossible. I check the register. No sale recorded. I check the shelves. Nothing missing. For the first time in 3 weeks, the night passes without a 247 visit. The next night, I wait with growing anxiety. 2:47 comes and goes with no sign of him. The store feels different now, emptier somehow, as if something essential has been removed. The familiar sounds, the humming lights, the cycling refrigerators seem louder in his absence, almost aggressive in their insistence on normalcy. I find myself missing him, which disturbs me more than his presence ever did. The routine had become comforting in its strangeness, a reliable constant in the long, lonely hours of the night shift. Now the time between 2:47 and dawn stretches endlessly, filled with nothing but my own breathing and the mechanical sounds of a convenience store after midnight. Days pass. A week. No sign of the regular customer with his cookies and apple juice. I begin to wonder if I imagined the entire thing, if the isolation and late hours had finally gotten to me. But the paper remains in my wallet, tucked behind my driver's license, as real as anything I've ever touched. Sometimes, in the quiet moments just before 3 a.m., I think I hear footsteps in aisle 3. But when I look, there's nothing there, just rows of snacks and an empty store waiting for dawn. The security mirror in the corner reflects only my own tired face and the familiar yellow glow of fluorescent lights. I've started to understand that some routines, once broken, can never be repaired. Some visitors, once acknowledged, choose their own time to leave, and some thank use are final. The clock reads 2:47 a.m., and the store is empty. It will remain empty, I think, until I too become just another routine, just another pattern in someone else's strange night. But sometimes I still count out exact change: 4 singles, 2 quarters, 1 dime, 1 nickel, 2 pennies, and wonder what I'm really paying for in this fluorescent, lit purgatory where time moves differently, and some customers never truly leave. The door sighs softly, though no one has entered or departed. The night continues, as it always does, carrying its secrets in the space between one breath and the next. Story 9. The tunnels breathe differently at night. During the day, when trains thunder through every few minutes. The air moves in predictable patterns, pushed and pulled by tons of metal and momentum, flowing like mechanical tides through the concrete arteries of the city. But after the last train runs, after the power shuts down to the third rail, the tunnels settle into their own rhythm. That's when I do my work. I've been maintaining this section of the subway system for 7 years, walking the abandoned tracks with my flashlight and toolkit, checking for structural damage, clearing debris, testing the integrity of support beams. Line 4, the old downtown route that was decommissioned 3 years ago when they built the new express tunnel 2 miles east. Officially, no trains run through here anymore. Officially, these tracks are dead, but something still moves through the darkness. It started about 6 months ago, a sound I couldn't quite place. Not the familiar groan of settling concrete, or the drip of condensation from the ceiling, something else. Something rhythmic and distant. I'd be checking the rail joints near the Meridian Street station, my flashlight beam cutting through the perpetual twilight, when I'd hear it. The sound of a train, not approaching, not receding, but constant, like an audio loop, playing somewhere in the depths of the tunnel system. A low rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the tracks under my feet, echoing off the tiled walls in ways that made it impossible to pinpoint the source. At first, I assumed it was bleed through from the active lines. Sound travels strangely underground, bouncing through maintenance shafts and service corridors, emerging in unexpected places. The city's subway system is a maze of interconnected tunnels, some dating back nearly a century, and phantom sounds are common. Old-timers talk about hearing long, decommissioned trolley cars, the ghostly clatter of equipment that hasn't run in decades. But this was different. This sounded like a modern train, the low electric hum of contemporary rail cars. And it was always there, waiting in the silence between my footsteps, lurking just below the threshold of conscious hearing, until I stopped moving and listened carefully. Tonight, I'm working the deep section, the stretch of tunnel that runs beneath the river district, where the ceiling is lower and the walls press closer. My flashlight cuts a narrow cone through the darkness ahead, illuminating the endless, parallel lines of the tracks and the regular spacing of support pillars. The air down here is different, thicker, more humid, carrying scents that seem older than the tunnels themselves. I'm about a mile from the nearest entrance when I hear it again. The train sound, clearer than it's ever been, distinct enough that I can make out individual components, the electric whine of motors, the rhythmic clacking of wheels over rail joints, even what sounds like the soft hiss of air brakes. I stop walking and hold my breath, straining to listen. The sound continues, steady and constant, neither growing louder nor fading away. It's as if a train is running parallel to my location, maintaining the exact same speed, staying forever just out of sight around the next curve or beyond the next junction. My radio crackles, static at first. Then the night dispatcher's voice. Unit 7, what's your location? Deep section, mile marker 23. I respond, keeping my voice low without quite knowing why. Copy that. Everything normal down there. I hesitate, listening to the persistent sound of the phantom train. Through the radio static, I think I can hear it there too. a background rumble beneath the dispatcher's words. Yeah, I say finally. All normal. But it isn't normal, and we both know it. 3 other maintenance workers have mentioned similar sounds over the past few months. Jenkins swears he saw lights in the old Central Avenue tunnel, the distinctive white and red pattern of an approaching train. Morris reported finding fresh scuff marks on rails that haven't been used in years. And Sarah requested a transfer to the day shift after she claimed to have felt wind from a passing train in a section where the power has been completely disconnected. I continue my patrol, my footsteps echoing in the confined space, but the train sound follows me. Sometimes it seems to be ahead of me, sometimes behind, sometimes running in the parallel tunnel that I know was sealed off during the renovation 5 years ago. When I pause to check a junction box or examine a potential stress fracture in the tunnel wall, the sound pauses too, as if whatever is making it is also stopping to wait. The beam of my flashlight wavers slightly. My hands are less steady than usual. The light catches something on the tunnel wall. Ahead, fresh scratches in the concrete, running parallel to the tracks at exactly the height where a train car would brush against the wall if it drifted slightly off-center. But these tunnels have been measured to precise specifications. No train should ever touch these walls. I move closer to examine the marks. They're not old, not weathered by years of disuse. The concrete dust at their base is still pale and fresh, as if they were made recently. Very recently. As I run my fingers along the gouges, I feel a vibration through the wall, subtle but unmistakable. Something large and heavy is moving on the other side. The train sound grows louder. I press my ear to the wall, feeling the cold concrete against my cheek. The vibration is stronger now, accompanied by a rhythmic pulsing that matches the phantom train's cadence. It's as if a full rail car is passing just inches from where I stand, separated only by a few feet of concrete and rebar. But that's impossible. The parallel tunnel was filled with concrete during the renovation. I was there when they poured it, watched the gray slurry flow into the space until it was completely solid. There's no room for a train to run there. No space for anything larger than a rat. My radio crackles again. Unit 7. We're showing some unusual readings on the old Line 4 sensors. I step back from the wall, confused. What kind of readings? Motion detectors are picking up something. Looks like a train. But that can't be right. The phantom sound stops abruptly. Not fading, not gradually diminishing, but cutting off mid. Note as if someone had thrown a switch. The silence that follows is absolute, deeper than the usual quiet of the abandoned tunnels. Even my own breathing seems unnaturally loud. I'm not seeing anything down here, I report, though I'm no longer sure what I trust my eyes, my ears, or the instruments that measure things I cannot perceive. Copy that. Might be a system glitch. Keep us posted. I continue deeper into the tunnel system, following my planned route toward the old transfer station. The silence persists, but it feels expectant now, like the pause between thunder and lightning. My flashlight beam seems weaker somehow, as if the darkness is actively pressing against it, requiring more effort to push back the shadows. The transfer station appears ahead, a wider section of tunnel where multiple lines once converged. The platform is still there, tiled in that distinctive green and white pattern that marked all the stations on the old downtown route. But the tiles look different in my flashlight beam cleaner, as if they've been recently maintained, polished by a something. I climb onto the platform, my boots echoing in the expanded space. The old benches are still here, the metal frames now rusted, but still recognizable as places where commuters once waited for trains that no longer run. Except one of the benches looks occupied. Not by a person, exactly, but by a presence. A subtle depression in the seat. A slight displacement of the dust that settles on everything in these abandoned spaces, as if someone had been sitting there recently, someone who left no other trace of their presence. I approach the bench cautiously, extending my flashlight toward the empty, but not empty seat. The beam reveals nothing unusual, just weathered metal and accumulated grime, but the sensation of occupancy remains. The air is warmer here, carrying the faint scent of human presence. Cologne or perfume, or simply the lived, in smell of someone who has spent time in this space. Behind me, I hear the distant whisper of air moving through the tunnel. Not wind. There's no source for natural airflow this deep underground, but the deliberate movement of displaced atmosphere, the kind of air movement created by something large passing through a confined space. A train. I turn toward the sound, and for just a moment, I see lights approaching from the depths of the tunnel. Not the harsh white of construction floods, or the yellow of maintenance lamps, but the warm, inviting glow of passenger car windows. The lights move with mechanical precision, maintaining perfect spacing, accompanied by the familiar sound of wheels on rails. I blink, and the lights are gone. The tunnel is empty again, dark and silent and dead. But on the platform where I stand, I notice something new, fresh scuff marks on the tiles, the kind left by countless feet entering and exiting train cars. And the yellow safety line, painted along the platform edge, faded and chipped when I first arrived, now appears bright and newly maintained, as if it's being regularly refreshed by some invisible maintenance crew. My radio crackles with static, but no voice comes through. Just white noise that almost sounds like distant conversation, like the murmur of passengers settling in for their commute. I adjust the frequency, trying to clear the signal, but the phantom conversations persist, just below the threshold of comprehensibility. I continue my patrol, but the tunnels feel different now, more alive somehow, as if the phantom train has awakened something that had been dormant. I find more evidence as I walk, fresh wear patterns on the rails, subtle displacement of debris, even what looks like recently dropped trash, a newspaper dated 3 years ago, but crisp and unweathered, as if it was discarded yesterday. Near the old Commerce Street station, I discover something that stops me cold. A maintenance log, attached to a clipboard hanging from a hook, that I know was empty when I passed through last week. The log is filled out in handwriting I don't recognize, documenting repairs and inspections conducted on dates that don't exist nights, when no maintenance crew was scheduled, performed by workers whose names don't appear in our system, but the work described in the log has actually been done. I check the locations mentioned in the entries and find evidence of recent repairs, replaced bolts, fresh welds, structural reinforcements that weren't there before. Someone or something is maintaining these abandoned tunnels with the same care and precision as the active lines. The phantom train sound returns, closer now, accompanied by other noises that shouldn't exist. The electronic chime that signals closing doors. The automated announcements warning passengers to stand clear. The subtle mechanical sounds of a functioning rail system. All of it happening in tunnels that have been officially dead for 3 years. I realize I'm no longer alone in my maintenance duties. Some other crew is working these tunnels, following their own schedule, maintaining their own version of a subway system that exists parallel to, but separate from the one I know. They work in the spaces between moments, in the time that exists after the last train runs and before the first one starts, keeping alive a system that officially no longer functions. My radio crackles again, and this time the voice that comes through is not the night dispatcher. Next stop, River District Station. Stand clear of the closing doors. The announcement echoes through the tunnel with perfect clarity, accompanied by the sound of brakes engaging and the hiss of pneumatic doors. I look around frantically, but I'm still alone on the empty tracks, surrounded by nothing but concrete and darkness. Yet passengers are disembarking somewhere nearby. I can hear their footsteps on tile, their quiet conversations, the rustle of clothing and newspapers. A ghost commute in a ghost system, serving passengers who travel routes that no longer exist to destinations that have been closed for years. I complete my patrol in a daze, checking off items on my clipboard with hands that shake slightly in the beam of my flashlight. By the time I reach the tunnel entrance, dawn is breaking above ground, and the phantom sounds are fading back into the silence that official records claim has always existed in these abandoned tunnels. But I know better now. I know that some systems, once established, continue to run long after they've been officially discontinued. Some routes persist in the spaces between scheduled services, carrying passengers who paid their fare in a currency that's no longer legal tender. I file my report as always, routine inspection. No unusual findings, all systems secure. But I make mental notes about the things I cannot document, the increasing frequency of the phantom train sounds, the fresh evidence of maintenance, work performed by crews that don't exist, with the growing sense that the abandoned tunnels are becoming more active rather than less. Tomorrow night, I'll return to walk the same routes, check the same systems, maintain the infrastructure of a subway line that was decommissioned 3 years ago. But I suspect I won't be working alone. Somewhere in the parallel darkness, another maintenance crew will be following their own schedule, keeping their own trains running on time. And perhaps, if I listen carefully enough in the spaces between official sounds, I'll hear their version of the dispatcher's voice calling out stops that no longer appear on any map, announcing arrivals and departures in a system that exists only in the echo of what once was and the promise of what might still be. The tunnels breathe differently at night, and now I know why. They're not empty at all. They're simply waiting for passengers who board trains that run on schedules written in dust and maintained by hands that leave no fingerprints. I'll see them again tomorrow, in the space between silence and sound, where the phantom train runs its eternal route through the underground darkness Story 10, the Whitmore Museum of Natural History, closes to the public at 6 p.m., but it never really sleeps, even after the last visitor exits through the heavy oak doors. After the lights dim and the docents hang up their badges, the building continues its quiet existence. Air filtration systems hum behind the walls. Climate control maintains precise temperatures and humidity levels, and security cameras sweep their programmed arcs through galleries that hold millions of years of Earth's history. I am the night guardian of all this accumulated time. My name is Marcus, and I've walked these halls after dark for 4 years now, making my rounds through exhibits that showcase everything from Paleozoic fossils to contemporary wildlife dioramas. 12-hour shifts, 6 nights a week, moving through the building with practiced efficiency, checking doors, monitoring alarms, ensuring that the museum's treasures remain undisturbed until morning brings back the living world. The work suits me. I prefer the quiet hours, the solitude, the sense of being a solitary caretaker in a vast repository of natural wonders. During the day, these halls echo with the chatter of school groups and the excited exclamations of children discovering dinosaurs for the first time. But at night, the museum belongs to deeper currents of time and memory. My route takes me through 14 different galleries, connected by corridors lined with glass cases containing specimens that have remained unchanged for decades. I start in the main hall, where the skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex stands frozen in eternal hunt, its massive skull turned toward the entrance, as if greeting visitors who will not arrive for hours. The emergency lighting casts long shadows between its ribs, creating patterns that shift slightly as I pass. From there, I move through the Hall of Ancient Civilizations, past Egyptian sarcophagi and Greek pottery, then into the Mineral Gallery with its displays of crystals and gemstones that catch and reflect. Even the dimmed security lighting. The Paleontology wing follows, filled with fossils embedded in stone, creatures that lived and died millions of years before humans existed to excavate and display their remains. But it's the monitoring room that tells the real story of my nights here. Banks of screens show feeds from security cameras positioned throughout the museum, each one cycling through preset views of the various galleries. During my rounds, I stop here every hour to review the footage, looking for anything unusual, any sign that the building's carefully maintained equilibrium has been disturbed. That's where I first noticed the anomalies. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would trigger official reports or emergency protocols. Just small inconsistencies that accumulated over time, patterns that emerged from careful observation of spaces that should remain utterly static between one night and the next. A pottery vessel in the Ancient Civilizations Gallery, displayed on a pedestal in front of a painted backdrop. In the camera feed, it appears to shift position slightly, not enough to be noticed by casual observation, but enough that I began taking photographs of the screen to compare positions from night to night. Over the course of a week, the vessel had rotated perhaps 30 degrees on its base. A mounted bird specimen in the Natural History wing, a peregrine falcon captured in an eternal swoop toward prey it would never catch. Its wings, spread wide in permanent flight, seemed to move through subtle changes of angle and position. Again, Nothing obvious enough to report, but consistent enough to notice if you spent enough hours watching the screens, looking for variations in spaces that were supposed to never vary. At first, I attributed these observations to tricks of light, digital artifacts, the kind of perceptual errors that can occur when you spend too many hours staring at security monitors in dimmed rooms. The human brain is designed to find patterns, even when no patterns exist, and I reasoned that my night shift isolation was creating phantom movements where none existed. But the pattern continued and expanded. The paleontology wing became particularly active. Fossils embedded in display cases began showing signs of what could only be described as restlessness. Trilobites seemed to curl and uncurl their segmented bodies within their stone matrices. A perfectly preserved fern frond appeared to sway slightly, as if moved by breezes that couldn't exist within the sealed display environment. Most disturbing of all was the centerpiece of the wing, a complete skeleton of a Parasaurolophus, a duck, billed dinosaur known for the distinctive hollow crest extending back from its skull. The skeleton had been mounted in a walking pose, head turned slightly to the left, as if the creature had been distracted by something just before fossilization. Over the course of several weeks, I documented subtle changes in the skeleton's posture. The head turned further to the left, degree by degree, night by night. The angle of the spine shifted, creating a more pronounced curve. Even the positioning of the feet seemed to adjust, as if the long, dead creature was slowly, imperceptibly completing the step it had begun 5 million years ago. I began taking detailed photographs during my rounds, using my phone to document the positions of exhibits that showed signs of movement. The images revealed changes that were too small to notice during real time observation, but too consistent to dismiss as imagination. The ancient civilization's gallery was equally active. Egyptian canopic jars rotated within their cases. A Greek amphora shifted position over the course of several nights, turning to face different directions, as if its painted figures were seeking better views of the gallery beyond their glass prison. Even the sarcophagus seemed to be adjusting its position, the lid sliding almost imperceptibly to reveal a slightly wider gap between the base and cover. But it was the monitoring room itself where I made the most unsettling discovery. The security cameras operate on preset patterns, automatically panning and zooming, according to programming that covers every inch of the museum's interior. Each camera's movement is predictable, timed to the second, following routes that were established when the system was installed 5 years ago, except the cameras were beginning to deviate from their programmed patterns. Subtle deviations at first, a slightly longer pause, before panning to the next predetermined position, or a zoom that held just a fraction longer than scheduled on particular exhibits. But as I watched more carefully, I realized the cameras were developing their own interests, their own focuses of attention. The camera monitoring the paleontology wing began spending extra time focused on the Parasaurolophus skeleton, not as part of its programmed sweep, but in addition to it, returning again and again to study the creature's slow transformation. When I reviewed the recorded footage, I found hours of video showing the camera fixated on the skeleton, following changes that were too gradual for human perception, but apparently visible to electronic eyes. Similar patterns emerged throughout the museum. Cameras lingered on exhibits that showed signs of movement, tracked objects that appeared to be shifting position, and even began to anticipate changes before they occurred. A camera would focus on a specific display case minutes before I would notice any alteration in its contents, as if the electronic surveillance system had developed precognitive abilities. The realization that I was not alone in observing these changes was both reassuring and deeply unnerving. The cameras were seeing what I was seeing, documenting phenomena that existed in the liminal space between imagination and reality. But they were also developing their own agenda, their own interpretation of what deserved attention in the dark hours when the museum belonged to forces older than human observation. Tonight feels different from the beginning of my shift. The air inside the building seems charged with potential energy, the way it feels before a thunderstorm. Even the familiar sounds of the museum, the background hum of climate control, the occasional settling of old wood and stone carry an expectant quality. I complete my first round without incident, but when I return to the monitoring room, I find something unprecedented. Every camera in the system is focused on a single location, the Hall of Ancient Civilizations, specifically the Egyptian sarcophagus that had been showing signs of movement for weeks. The lid, which had been shifting gradually over time, now sits completely askew, revealing a gap wide enough to peer into the interior. But that's not what captures my attention. What stops me cold is the realization that something is looking back. Not eyes in any conventional sense, but a presence that fills the space within the sarcophagus, aware and watching. The cameras have arranged themselves like an audience, electronic witnesses to whatever is emerging from the confines of its ancient resting place. I leave the monitoring room and walk through the museum toward the Hall of Ancient Civilizations, my flashlight beam preceding me through corridors that feel more alive than they should. The building itself seems to be holding its breath, waiting for something that has been building for weeks to finally manifest. When I reach the sarcophagus, I find it exactly as the cameras showed, lid displaced, interior visible but empty. Empty, yet not vacant. The space within holds the impression of occupancy, the suggestion of form without substance. And around the exhibit, other pieces are responding to whatever presence has stirred from its long dormancy. Pottery vessels have turned to face the sarcophagus like worshippers gathering for a ceremony. Stone sculptures have shifted their positions to create a rough circle around the central display. Even artifacts from other cultures, Roman coins, Greek statuary, Mesopotamian tablets, have oriented themselves toward whatever force is awakening in the Egyptian exhibit. The cameras continue their vigil, no longer following their programmed sweeps, but maintaining constant observation of the unfolding tableau. Through their electronic eyes, I can sense an intelligence that parallels my own growing awareness that the museum's collection is not as dormant as it appears during daylight hours. I return to the monitoring room, but the screens now show something impossible. The feeds from different galleries reveal, and not the static displays I know by heart, but scenes of activity that shouldn't exist. The paleontology wing shows creatures moving with fluid, living motion not the jerky animation of mechanical models, but the organic flow of actual life. The Parasaurolophus lifts its head fully, the hollow crest catching light that seems to emanate from within the fossil itself. In the natural history wing, mounted specimens flex muscles beneath preserved skin, stretch wings that haven't felt wind for decades, turn glass eyes that now hold depths of awareness I never noticed before. A mountain lion crouches lower on its display platform, tail switching with predatory patience. An owl rotates its head to stare directly into the camera, as if it can see me watching through the electronic link. But it's the hall of ancient civilizations that holds my attention. The presence I sensed within the sarcophagus has emerged, not as a visible form, but as an organizing principle that affects everything around it. Artifacts arrange themselves with purpose, creating patterns that speak of ritual and reverence. The Egyptian exhibits glow with the warm light of oil lamps that were never lit, casting hieroglyphic shadows on walls that whisper in languages older than memory. I understand now that my role as night security guard has evolved into something more significant. I'm not just protecting the museum's collection from thieves and vandals. I'm serving as witness to a transformation that occurs only in the dark hours, when the accumulated weight of preserved history reaches a critical mass and begins to remember what it once was. The monitoring system has become my partner in this observation, the cameras serving as additional senses that can perceive changes too subtle for human eyes alone. Together, we document the museum's secret life, the way artifacts and specimens respond to the deep currents of memory that flow through spaces dedicated to preserving the past. My radio crackles, the first external sound I've heard in hours, but instead of the expected voice of the night dispatcher, what emerges is something else entirely, the sound of ancient drums, rhythmic and hypnotic, accompanied by chanting in a language I don't recognize but somehow understand. The voices speak of awakening, of the thin boundary between preservation and resurrection, of the power that accumulates in places where time is held suspended. I walk through the galleries again, but this time I'm not alone. The presence from the sarcophagus moves with me, not visible but unmistakably there, guiding my attention to exhibits that pulse with renewed vitality. Under its influence, I see the museum as it truly is, not a repository of dead objects, but a sanctuary, where the past maintains its grip on existence, where preservation is just another word for a very slow form of life. The fossils in the paleontology wing tell stories of creatures that refuse to accept extinction, their consciousness embedded in stone, like messages waiting for the right receiver. The cultural artifacts whisper of civilizations that continue to exist in the spaces between memory and matter, their influence radiating outward through objects that once held sacred meaning. Even the building itself participates in this nocturnal awakening. Walls that were constructed to contain and display now serve as conductors for energies that flow between exhibits, connecting disparate elements of the collection into a unified whole that transcends the organizational categories imposed by human curators. I realize that I've become part of this system, my nightly rounds serving not just to protect, but to complete a circuit that allows the museum's hidden consciousness to fully manifest. My presence, my attention, my growing awareness of the changes occurring around me. All of these elements are necessary components in the process that transforms a collection of preserved artifacts into something approaching genuine resurrection. The hours between midnight and dawn become a theater, where the past performs for an audience of one, where the accumulated weight of preserved history expresses itself through movement and light, and the subtle rearrangement of objects that shouldn't be able to move at all. And I am both audience and participant, witness and catalyst, the living element that allows the preserved dead to remember what animation feels like. As dawn approaches, the activity begins to subside. The cameras return to their programmed patterns. The exhibits settle back into their designated positions. The presence from the sarcophagus retreats into whatever dimension serves as its resting place. But the changes remain small alterations in position and orientation that will puzzle the day staff. Evidence of nocturnal activity that exists just beyond the threshold of official acknowledgement. I complete my final round as the first light of morning filters through the museum's high windows. The T, Rex, in the main hall appears motionless again, but I catch a glimpse of satisfaction in its massive skull, as if the creature has accomplished something important during the night hours. The Egyptian sarcophagus has returned to its properly aligned state, but the lid sits just slightly askew, maintaining a hairline gap that suggests the possibility of future emergence. In the monitoring room, I review the night's recorded footage, knowing that the official record will show nothing more than the expected static displays and my routine security rounds. The cameras may have developed their own awareness, but they're also wise enough to maintain the illusion of normalcy for daytime consumption. I file my standard report, all systems operational, no security incidents. Museum secure, and prepare to leave as the morning shift arrives. But I carry with me the knowledge that I'll return tonight to continue my true purpose, serving as guardian and witness to a museum that comes alive in the dark hours, where preservation and resurrection exist in a delicate balance maintained by the careful attention of those who understand that some things refuse to remain entirely dead. The past has its own agenda, its own will to persist, and I have become its collaborator in the ongoing project of remembering what it means to exist. Tonight, I'll walk these halls again, and the artifacts will continue their slow dance between memory and matter, watched over by cameras that see more than they were programmed to see, and protected by a guard who has learned security sometimes means helping the dead remember how to dream. The museum never really sleeps, and neither. I'm beginning to understand, do I? Story 11. Bellwood University's East Residence Hall has housed students for 43 years, and in that time, I've seen every possible variation of college life play out within its brick walls. Students arrive in August with their parents' cars, packed full of hope and necessity. They live and learn and grow through the academic year, and then they graduate or transfer, or sometimes simply disappear into the larger world without fanfare. The cycle repeats endlessly, predictable as seasons. I've been the residence hall manager here for 11 years, and I know every room, every quirk of the building's aging infrastructure, every hiding place where students think they can conceal prohibited items from periodic inspections. room assignments, maintenance requests, disciplinary issues, medical emergencies, all of it flows through my office. All of it becomes part of the institutional memory that I carry like a burden and a privilege. But there's one room that doesn't follow the normal patterns. Room 247, on the second floor, northeast corner, with 2 windows facing the courtyard and a connecting door to 249 that was sealed years ago when the university reconfigured the floor plan. The student who lived there graduated 3 years ago, but the room hasn't been empty since. Her name was Rebecca Chen, a biochemistry major from Portland who kept to herself, spent most nights in the library, and never caused any trouble that required administrative intervention. A model student, really the kind who pays their housing fees on time, doesn't throw parties, and leaves their room cleaner than they found it. When she graduated summa cum laude in May 3 years ago, she moved out according to schedule, returned her keys to my office, and disappeared into whatever life awaited her beyond these walls. Standard procedure requires that vacated rooms be thoroughly cleaned and inspected before the start of the next academic year. I personally supervised the deep cleaning of 247, watched the maintenance staff strip the bed, vacuum the carpet, wipe down every surface. The room was left in perfect condition, ready for new occupancy. But when August arrived and the new resident moved in, a freshman named David Martinez, he lasted exactly 4 days before requesting a room change. There's someone else living there, he told me during the emergency meeting. I called after his residence advisor reported his frantic late night complaints. I can hear them moving around at night, using the bathroom, even cooking something that smells like... He paused, searching for words, like home cooking, Asian food, maybe Chinese. The smell is so strong it wakes me up. I checked with building maintenance. No odors reported, no signs of unauthorized occupancy, no unusual activity recorded on the key card access logs. David's story didn't match any objective evidence, but his distress was genuine enough that I approved his transfer to a different floor. The next student assigned to 247 lasted 6 days. Jennifer Walsh, a sophomore transfer student, reported similar phenomena. A sounds of occupancy when the room should have been empty, lingering sense of meals being prepared, and what she described as evidence that someone else is living there when I'm not around. An evidence. I asked her to elaborate. The desk chair gets moved, she said. I always push it in completely, but when I come back from class, it's pulled out slightly, like someone was just sitting there. And the shower, there's condensation on the walls, like someone used it recently, even when I haven't showered for hours. Again, I found no objective proof of unauthorized access. The electronic locks showed only Jennifer's key card entries and exits. Security cameras in the hallway revealed no unusual foot traffic, but Jennifer's anxiety was affecting her academic performance. So I arranged another room change. This pattern continued through the fall semester. 5 different students assigned to 247, each lasting between 4 days and 2 weeks before requesting transfers due to signs of invisible occupancy. Their stories were remarkably consistent. Sounds of daily activity, cooking smells, subtle evidence that someone else was using the room's facilities and furniture during their absences. by spring semester. I had stopped assigning students to 247. Officially, it was listed as temporarily out of service for maintenance, a designation that bought me time to investigate without having to explain phenomena that I couldn't document or verify. The room remained locked and empty, at least according to all official records. But empty rooms don't generate utility bills that exceed normal parameters. Empty rooms don't require the HVAC system to work harder to maintain comfortable temperatures. And empty rooms don't trigger motion sensors that are supposed to activate only when occupied. The utility bills for 247 showed consistent usage patterns, electricity consumption that matched a normally occupied room, water usage that suggested regular showers and bathroom activities, even gas usage from the small kitchenette that indicated frequent cooking. When I questioned the utility company, they confirmed that the consumption data was accurate and automatically recorded by digital meters that couldn't be manipulated or misread. The HVAC system's computerized controls showed that room 247 required constant climate adjustment, as if the space was regularly occupied by someone who preferred temperatures different from the building's standard settings. The thermostat would be adjusted every few hours, moved from the 72-degree default to various settings between 68 and 76 degrees, following a pattern that suggested personal comfort preferences. Motion sensors installed throughout the building for energy conservation purposes showed regular activation in 247, particularly during evening hours and early morning times when a student would typically be in their room, studying or preparing for bed. The sensors were triggered frequently enough to keep the room's lights and ventilation operating at occupancy levels rather than the reduced settings used for vacant spaces. I began conducting my own surveillance of the room, using my master key to enter at random times during the day and night. What I found challenged everything I understood about the nature of occupancy and abandonment. The room showed clear signs of habitation, despite being officially vacant for nearly a year. The bed, which I had personally verified, was left with standard issue linens, appeared to have been slept in not currently, but recently, with the kind of subtle disarray that suggests regular use. The pillow held the permanent impression of a head. The mattress showed the wear pattern of someone who slept primarily on the left side. Personal items had appeared in the room, things that weren't there during my previous inspections. A coffee mug sat on the desk, still warm to the touch despite the fact that no one should have been there for hours. Books appeared on the shelf, textbooks for chemistry and biology courses, some of them titles I recognized from Rebecca's academic program. Even clothing had materialized in the closet. Women's clothes in sizes that would fit Rebecca, hanging neatly as if waiting for their owner to return from class. The kitchenette showed the most disturbing evidence of invisible occupancy. Fresh food appeared in the small refrigerator vegetables, takeout containers from local restaurants, even leftovers wrapped in foil or plastic containers. The sink occasionally held dishes that needed washing, plates and utensils that showed signs of recent use. The microwave retained the lingering sense of meals heated within the past few hours. Most unsettling of all were the personal touches that accumulated over time. Photos appeared on the bulletin board above the desk, pictures of Rebecca with friends. family portraits, academic achievement certificates with her name prominently displayed. The desk itself accumulated the detritus of student life pens, notebooks filled with handwriting I recognized as hers, assignment calendars with due, dates that corresponded to courses offered 3 years ago. The room was being maintained by someone who was continuing to live there, despite having graduated and officially moved out years earlier. But surveillance cameras in the hallway never showed anyone entering or exiting. Keycard logs recorded no access attempts. Electronic security systems designed to detect unauthorized presence registered nothing. I began to suspect that Rebecca Chen had never actually left room 247, at least not in any complete sense. Some essential part of her remained connected to the space, continuing to occupy it on a level that existed below the threshold of normal perception, but above the threshold of official documentation. To test this theory, I started leaving notes in the room. Simple messages written on university letterhead. Please contact the housing office to discuss your continuing residency status. I would place these notes on the desk before leaving, and when I returned, they would be gone. Not discarded, simply absent, as if they had never existed. In their place, I would sometimes find responses. Notes written in Rebecca's handwriting, brief messages that acknowledged my presence while maintaining the fiction of normal occupancy. Everything is fine. No maintenance issues to report. Or, thank you for checking. Room is in good condition. Always polite, always proper, always signed with her name. I pulled Rebecca's academic records and discovered something that explained, perhaps, why she had maintained such a strong connection to room 247. She had lived there for all 4 years of her undergraduate program, unusual, since most students moved off campus or to different residence halls after their sophomore year. But Rebecca had requested to remain in the same room annually, citing the stability and familiarity it provided during her intensive academic program. Her records also showed that she had struggled with significant anxiety disorders throughout her college years, conditions that were managed through the Student Counseling Center, but that required the kind of consistent environment that room 247 provided. For her, the room hadn't just been temporary housing, it had been a sanctuary, a carefully controlled environment that allowed her to function despite psychological challenges that might have otherwise derailed her academic success. She had graduated with highest honors and been accepted to a prestigious graduate program at a university across the country. But according to the counseling center's records, she had expressed significant anxiety about leaving the security and familiarity of her established environment. Now, 3 years after her official departure, she had apparently found a way to maintain her connection to the space that had served as her refuge during the most formative years of her adult life. The room continued to provide the stability and security she needed, even as she presumably pursued her graduate studies elsewhere. I stopped trying to assign other students to 247. Instead, I quietly adjusted the housing records to reflect permanent occupancy by a student who had graduated but somehow remained enrolled in the deeper curriculum of memory and attachment. I included her in the head count for safety purposes, maintained the utilities and cleaning services that her invisible presence required, and filed the paperwork that kept her officially connected to the institution. The arrangement seemed to work for everyone involved. Rebecca's ghostly residency caused no problems beyond the inconvenience of having one fewer room available for assignment. She paid no rent, generated no disciplinary issues, never missed curfew, or violated quiet hours. She was, in many ways, the ideal student, present when necessary, invisible when convenient, maintaining perfect grades in courses that existed only in the liminal space between memory and reality. Sometimes, when I make my evening rounds through the building, I can hear the soft sounds of studying coming from room 247A, pages turning, pencils scratching against paper, the occasional rustle of movement as she shifts position at her desk. The sounds are comforting in their familiarity, evidence that some students form such strong connections to their academic environment that graduation becomes just another administrative formality rather than an actual ending. I've come to think of myself as Rebecca's unofficial residence advisor, responsible for ensuring that her continued occupancy remains as smooth and undisturbed as possible. I maintain the room's systems, respond to any maintenance needs that arise, and file reports that document normal occupancy without raising questions about the nature or visibility of the occupant. Late at night, when the residence hall settles into its quiet hours and most students are asleep in their officially assigned rooms, I sometimes catch glimpses of light under the door of 247, the soft glow of a desk lamp being used for late night study, the brief illumination of someone moving between the bed and the bathroom, the warm yellow rectangle that indicates someone is home. And in those moments, I'm reminded that some students never really leave the places that shaped them, that some connections between person and place transcend the arbitrary boundaries of enrollment periods and graduation dates. Rebecca Chen may have walked across the stage to receive her diploma 3 years ago, but part of her remained behind to continue the work of being a student in the only environment where she had ever truly felt secure. I'll retire eventually, but I suspect my replacement will inherit the responsibility of maintaining room 247's occupied vacancy, of ensuring that the university's most dedicated alumna continues to have access to the resources she needs to pursue whatever studies still require her presence within these walls. Some lessons, after all, can only be learned in the spaces where we first discovered who we were meant to become. A story 12. The idea comes to me during the morning news, watching yet another story about a missing person, a girl about my age with long brown hair and worried parents who speak to reporters with trembling voices. She's been gone for 3 days now, they say, vanished without a trace from the parking lot of a grocery store. The police have no leads. I study her photograph on the screen, memorizing the curve of her nose, the way her hair falls across her left shoulder, the slight gap between her front teeth. Sarah Martinez, 19 years old, last seen wearing a red jacket and dark jeans. She has kind eyes, the sort that make people want to trust her, want to help her. She looks enough like me that it might work. The thought should horrify me, but it doesn't. Instead, I feel a flutter of excitement, the same feeling I used to get as a child when I'd successfully convince my parents I was too sick for school. There's power in deception, in being someone you're not, in watching the world react to the lie you've carefully constructed. I've always been forgettable. Plain face, average height. The kind of person who blends into crowds without trying. But Sarah Martinez missing Sarah. Martinez, she's someone people care about. Someone worth looking for. The plan forms itself as I watch the news report. I'll become her, just for a while. I'll let myself be found, rescued, become the center of attention I've never been. The grateful parents, the relieved police officers, the media attention, all of it focused on me, finally seeing me, finally caring about what happens to me. It takes 3 days to prepare. I study every detail of Sarah's case that the news reveals, memorizing her story until it becomes more real to me than my own life. I buy a red jacket at a thrift store, close enough to the one described that no one will notice the difference. I practice her smile in the mirror, the way she tilts her head in photographs, the soft way she speaks in the home video, her parents released to the media. I learn about her family, her friends, her job at the local bookstore. I create a map of trauma in my mind, imagining what terrible things might have happened to her during those 3 days she was missing, crafting a story that will explain my confused state, my inability to remember certain details. The hardest part is disappearing from my own life, but that turns out to be easier than I expected. I live alone in a studio apartment, work a job where no one would notice if I didn't show up for a week. I have no close friends, no family who calls regularly. Disappearing is just a matter of not being where I usually am. And since where I usually am doesn't matter to anyone, no one notices. On the chosen night, I walk to the edge of town, to a wooded area near the highway, where someone might believably stumble out after days of wandering lost and confused. I tear my clothes carefully, rub dirt into my skin, tangle my hair. I practice my stumble, the dazed look I'll wear, the way I'll react when the first car stops. The headlights find me sooner than expected. A truck pulls over, hazard lights blinking, and a middle-aged man gets out. His face is full of concern, the kind of genuine worry that makes my chest tight with something that might be guilt. Miss, are you all right? I look up at him with Sarah's eyes, Sarah's confused smile. Where am I? I don't remember how I got here. He wraps me in a blanket from his truck, calls 911 on his cell phone. His voice shakes as he describes finding me. This poor lost girl on the side of the road. He stays with me until the ambulance arrives, holding my hand and telling me everything will be okay now, that I'm safe, that people have been looking for me. The paramedics are gentle, asking questions I answer with carefully crafted confusion. No, I don't remember exactly what happened. Yes, I think my name is Sarah. Sarah Martinez. I was going to the store, and then nothing. Just darkness and fear, and the sound of footsteps behind me. At the hospital, they call Sarah's parents. I've watched them on television, but seeing them in person is different. Maria Martinez has the same eyes as her daughter, but they're red from crying, shadowed with sleepless nights. Frank Martinez moves like a man who's forgotten how to hope, his shoulders permanently hunched with worry. When they see me lying in the hospital bed, when I look up at them with their daughter's face, something breaks inside them. Sarah. Maria whispers, and she's crying again. but these are different tears. Oh, my baby, we thought. We were so scared. They rushed to embrace me, and I let them, feeling their relief pour over me like warm water. This is what I wanted, to be the center of someone's world, to be the answer to someone's prayers. Frank's arms are strong around me, Maria's tears wet against my cheek, and for a moment, I almost believe I really am their daughter, really am Sarah Martinez come home. The police interview is easier than I expected. Detective Rodriguez is kind but thorough, asking questions about my 3 days of captivity. I stick to my story, confused memories, a dark room, the sound of someone moving around outside. I can't describe my captor clearly because I was blindfolded most of the time. I escaped when he left and didn't lock the door properly. Can you remember anything else? She asks, leaning forward with the intensity of someone who's made finding missing people her life's work. Any sounds, smells, anything that might help us find where you were held. I close Sarah's eyes and pretend to concentrate. There was a ticking sound, like a clock but louder, and it smelled like old books, musty, but not unpleasant. For she writes everything down, treating my lies like precious clues that might solve other cases, might bring other missing girls home. The weight of her trust, her dedication, settles on me like a stone. The media attention is everything I dreamed it would be. Reporters want to interview the girl who came back, the miracle survivor. I appear on the local news, then the regional broadcasts, telling my story with Sarah's voice, Sarah's mannerisms. The anchor calls me brave, calls my survival inspiring. What would you say to other families dealing with a missing loved one? She asks, her face perfectly arranged in an expression of compassionate interest. Don't give up hope. I say, and I mean it, even as the words taste like ash in my mouth. Keep looking. Keep believing. Sometimes people do come home. But living Sarah's life is harder than I anticipated. Her parents want to spend every moment with their returned daughter, making up for the lost time, the days they thought they'd never see her again. They hover, protective and loving, asking if I need anything, if I'm comfortable, if I remember anything else about my ordeal. Her friends visit constantly, wanting to reconnect with their missing piece. They share memories I don't have, reference inside jokes I don't understand, expect emotional responses to stories that mean nothing to me. I become an actress playing a role 24 hours a day, and the performance is exhausting. Worse are the quiet moments when I catch Maria staring at me with a puzzled expression, as if something doesn't quite fit. She doesn't say anything, but I see her watching me eat breakfast. Sarah apparently hated eggs. Something I didn't know, watching me laugh at television shows that never made her daughter smile. You seem different, she says one evening as we sit together on the couch, some family movie playing on the screen. The experience changed you, didn't it? Trauma does that, I reply, which is what all the psychology articles said she'd want to hear. I'm still me, just deprocessing everything, as she nods and squeezes my hand, but her eyes remain troubled. I see her whispering to Frank in the kitchen, see them having hushed conversations that stop when I enter the room. They're beginning to suspect something, even if they can't put their finger on what. The real Sarah's disappearance remains unsolved. Detective Rodriguez continues investigating, following the false clues I've given her, searching for a kidnapper who doesn't exist, a location that was never real. Other families with missing daughters call, hoping that finding me means their loved ones might come back too. I've become a symbol of hope, built on a foundation of lies, and the weight of that begins to crush something inside me I didn't know existed. 3 weeks into my new life, I realize I'm being followed. It starts as a feeling, the prickle at the back of my neck, that someone is watching. I catch glimpses of the same car in my peripheral vision, see the same figure in a dark coat lingering at the edges of my vision. When I turn to look directly, there's nothing there, but the feeling persists. At first, I assume it's a reporter trying to get another angle on the story, or perhaps an overzealous detective following up on leads. But the surveillance feels different, more personal, more intimate. Whoever is watching me knows something, wants something specific. I start varying my routine, taking different routes when I go out, watching reflections in store windows to see if anyone is following. The presence is always there, patient and persistent as a shadow. One night, I wake to the sound of someone moving around outside the Martinez house. I slip out of bed, Sarah's bed, into Sarah's room and peer through the curtains. A figure stands under the streetlight across the street, perfectly still, watching the house. Even in the dim light, I can tell it's a woman. She's wearing dark clothes, her hair hidden under a hood, but something about her posture is familiar in a way that makes my stomach clench with sudden fear. When she turns to leave, the streetlight catches her profile for just a moment. It's Sarah Martinez, the real Sarah Martinez. She's alive, she's here, and she's been watching me live her life. The next morning, I find a note slipped under my car windshield. We need to talk. Tonight, the park where you escaped. Come alone. My hands shake as I hold the paper. The handwriting is neat, feminine, nothing threatening about it, except for what it represents, the end of everything I've built, the collapse of the identity I've stolen. But I have to go. I have to know how much she knows, what she wants, whether she's going to expose me, or if there's some way to fix this without destroying the family that's grown to love me. The park is empty when I arrive, just shadows and the distant sound of traffic. I wait on a bench near the spot where I pretended to stumble out of the woods, my heart hammering against my ribs. The night is quiet, too quiet, as if the world is holding its breath. "You're good," a voice says behind me, and I turn to see her stepping out of the darkness between 2 trees. I almost believed it myself, watching you on the news. You really studied me, didn't you? She looks exactly like her photographs, but different too. Thinner, paler, with hollow eyes that have seen things I can only imagine. She moves with a careful precision, as if she's afraid of making too much noise. "Where have you been?" I ask, though I'm not sure I want to know the answer. She sits on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining distance between us, hiding, waiting, watching you take over my life. I can explain. Can you? She turns to look at me directly, and I see that her eyes are different now, ancient in a way that doesn't match her 19 years. Can you explain why you decided to become me? Why you're living in my house, sleeping in my bed, letting my parents cry tears of relief over someone who isn't their daughter? I want to tell her about the loneliness, the invisibility, The desperate need to matter to someone. But looking at her now, seeing what she's become, the words die in my throat. The question, she continues, is what we do now. I could go home, tell everyone who I really am, expose you as the fraud you are. My parents would be devastated, of course, to lose me twice like that. Then why don't you? She smiles, and it's not a pleasant expression. Because I learned something during my actual disappearance. I learned what it feels like to truly disappear, to become nothing, to exist in the spaces between other people's lives. It's liberating, in a way. I don't understand. I was taken, she says quietly, by someone who collects people like us, people no one would miss, people who blend into crowds. He had others, girls who'd been there for months, years even. We lived in the dark, became shadows of ourselves, until we forgot we'd ever been real. My blood turns to ice. How did you escape? I didn't. Her smile widens, becoming something that belongs more on a predator than a victim. I became something else instead. Something that doesn't need to be found, because it was never really lost. Something that exists in the spaces between what people expect to see and what's actually there. She reaches out and touches my hand, and her fingers are cold as winter. You wanted to disappear into someone else's life, to become me. Well, congratulations. You got your wish. You can stay Sarah Martinez forever. What you mean? I mean, I don't want that life back. I don't want to be the girl who comes home, who has to explain where she's been, who has to pretend that what happened to her didn't change everything. You can keep being their daughter, their miracle. I have other plans. The relief should be overwhelming, but instead I feel a growing sense of dread. What kind of plans? She stands, smoothing down her dark coat. There are others like you out there. People living lives that don't belong to them, wearing identities like costumes. Someone needs to find them, to remind them that every stolen life leaves a gap in the world. You're talking about killing people. I'm talking about balance, she corrects. About making sure that when someone disappears, they stay disappeared. About ensuring that the families of the truly missing don't get false hope from pretenders like you. She starts to walk away, then pauses. Enjoy your new family. Love them well, because they deserve to be loved. But remember, you're not the only one who knows how to become someone else. And I'll be watching, always watching, to make sure you stay Sarah Martinez forever. She melts back into the shadows, leaving me alone on the bench with the weight of my stolen identity and the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, the real Sarah Martinez has become something far more dangerous than anything I ever pretended to be. I drive home to the house that isn't mine, to parents who love a daughter I'm not, to a life built on lies that have become the only truth I have left. Maria and Frank are asleep when I slip inside, but I can hear them breathing, can feel the peace that comes from believing their child is safe. In Sarah's mirror, I practice Sarah's smile, but it looks different now. Hollow. Desperate. The performance continues, must continue, because stopping would mean admitting what I've done, what I've taken, what I've become. Outside, the shadows move differently than they used to. I know she's out there somewhere, the girl whose life I stole, becoming something new and terrible. And I know that other pretenders like me are waking up to find their carefully constructed worlds beginning to crumble. I am Sarah Martinez now, forever and always. It's what I wanted, what I chose. I just never realized that getting what you want can be its own kind of prison, and that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The clock on Sarah's nightstand ticks toward midnight, and somewhere in the distance, I hear the sound of footsteps that might be real, or might be the echo of my own guilt, walking circles around the life I've built on someone else's foundation. I close my eyes and try to sleep, but sleep feels too much like disappearing. And I've learned that disappearing isn't always a choice you get to make.